Hey guys, welcome back to our next tier list. Today we're going to be talking about Jedza and the Seeker keyword.
Alright, folks, so as Sam said, we're doing our tier list for the Seeker keyword, and we'll be joined by Doug, Sam, and as always, the Haku and the Pope. But before we kick off with the models and how good or not they are in each Jedza title, this is our friend DefectiveDice kicking off to fill in some background on our mysterious friend Jedza, and as always, his video that goes super in depth with the lore of Jedza is linked below, so make sure to check it out. Alright, Mr. Dice, what's the origin of this Jedza lady?
In her early days, Jedza always noticed that wherever she went, life always seemed to be a little bit more vibrant. But she always had to stay aware, as she had witnessed a terrible evil, and as a result, she's being hunted. Over time, she aged, but death never found her, and she soon came to realize that her blessing was actually a curse. Over the centuries, she witnessed the birth and death of many loved ones, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. When the breach to Earth opened, Jedza was curious, and when her past finally caught up with her, she was saved by a strange woman. Now that the second breach is open, Gretchen Janis of the Explorer Society has come to call in that favor. She's told she'll be traveling with a sheriff and his daughter, an arrangement she doesn't like, because Mikhail's all the bodyguards she needs. Before setting out, she meets with an old friend, the swamp hag Zoraida. The two women discuss the place she'll be heading to, and Zoraida tells Jedza that she's also got questions that she'd like some answers to. Jedza meets with Base, and they set off for the mountains, where they enter a mysterious cave that's full of strange objects and an unusual presence. Eventually, they find the remains of a creature, and in Jedza's presence it's reanimated, and the woman offers to strike a deal. She acquires a piece of a machine, and gets the answers to some secret questions. But who this creature was, and what the questions were, remains a mystery.
So, let's begin. We've got our Yedzas sorted. Let's talk about her totem. I think Sophie is an always take. Because as much as you talk about, like, there are circumstances where you won't take your totem, like in the Lady Justice thing we talked about, cursed objects maybe. Sophie is just pretty key. Sophie is a big cow that basically exists to make you angry when you miss her extremely low TNs. This model does two things. She hands out focus, and she hands out life tokens. Both Yedzas want life tokens. The first Jedza doesn't really care about focus, but there are other models in her crew that do. Like, there's no crew in the game that doesn't want some focus for free. And the second Jedza really cares about stacking focus. So Sophie is a model that does a few things for you, but one of the things she does that's not super obvious is her trigger that hands out a life token damages her. And damaging yourself is very important in this crew because of all the chronicle effects. Chronicle effects only trigger if you actually heal. If you're at full health and you get targeted by an effect that would heal you, it doesn't trigger them. So if you're trying to trigger chronicle effects, and there are a few chronicle effects that you will really, really want to trigger, which we'll talk about when we get to those models, you need somebody who's capable of damaging themselves in a reliable way, and Sophie does that. So in my opinion, she's kind of the perfect totem. In a way, just she's not super impactful in terms of combat, although she does have an attack that always inflicts injured, so it's not, nothing. But mostly what she exists to do is just support what the crew is trying to do. And she does that by handing out focus, she does that by feeding Jedza life tokens, and she does that by damaging herself so that you can trigger your various chronicle effects. So, I mean, you don't have a choice about whether or not you're going to take her. So there's not that much, talking about the decision-making process of whether you're taking Sophie or not. But when you take her, it's very important to have her in turn one, get that, that life token out, get that focus out, and get started on chaining all those really cool chronicle effects together. And also, don't forget that she gives your crew bonus movement. The crew's not super slow, but it does tend to take walk actions, and having those walk actions be a little bit faster is always nice.
Now, what's your take on it? Any spicy war stories, or I mean, I know you've been playing a ton of Jezda 2 lately. You've been on Jezda 1 too for a little bit.
No, I don't really play Jezda 1 very much, but a little bit. But yeah, Sophie, I think the big thing with Sophie is just remember that she's like very much an early turns totem, where like the stuff that she really wants to do is turn 1, turn 2, and so it's easy to forget her in the later turns or to basically treat her as a pass token. But the fact that her attack just inflicts injured is kind of a big deal. Like, it's a stat 4, so I wouldn't cheat a card to make it hit, but you can throw some attacks in there, and if you hit, like, suddenly your opponent's in pretty much a bad spot, because this crew takes advantage of injured pretty well. Like, there's some pretty high damage potential in this crew if you're spiking well.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some spicy injured synergy later on in this video, I'm sure. So
I just want to say my favorite Sophie story is killing Tara with Sophie, just because of how good Trampling Hooves is as an attack action. I just like kicked the shit out of a Tara that was trying to be cute and like bury all my stuff to try and get it out of the bubble. And Sophie just comes in with her hooves, knocks her down to like defense 3, and he's like, "Oh shit, I fucked up."
So when an angry undead cow beats up a otherworld sorceress to death, it's only Malifaux. Just
Yeah,
Malifaux things.
attacks that inflict injured without a trigger are really good in this game.
Yeah, I agree. So I kind of agree with where you're at on Sophie, Sam. I don't have too much to add. I mean, I think a big part of this is you're the one who taught me how to play the Seeker keyword. So I think a handful of your takes here, at least on the blocking and tackling components of the crew, we're probably going to share a lot of the same opinions. Mr. Landon, do you want to add anything? Mr. Pope?
Yeah, so it's been a hot minute since I played this crew, but when I did play this crew, one of the things you have to like look for when you're making plays in like the mid to later turns is the fact that Sophie has companion, and sometimes that's just a lot of extra damage you can put into a guy that your opponent just won't expect, because like we said, like Trampling Hooves is actually a pretty decent attack, and you know, later in the turn you've got better card quality because of using all your chronicles, and that stat 4 can go way farther than you might give it credit for.
I will say, if Sophie had Accomplice instead of Companion, she would be busted.
Yeah, but even still, companion getting 2 extra attacks in, not the worst.
No,
But
it's totally fine.
definitely important to use grab for the pack early on, like the Damned if you take it, or the Grave Goo.
Yeah,
one of
I
those
will
two.
say that it is frustrating that Sophie's attacks, or say Sophie's relevant abilities rather, all have TNs. It's something that we'll return to when we talk about the masters themselves, maybe. But this crew's really TN heavy, like really,
Yeah,
really.
but I
TN.
think all of the like abilities on Sophie are worth the cards for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, it's just it's sort of the first you'd see of a recurring theme with the crew, which is that this crew like really loves TNs.
But
Yeah.
I just want to say that, you know, my take is just that like it's easy to forget about this totem in the later turns. Just make sure you're doing something with it. It's significant. It has a reasonable attack. Do something with it. Don't just, you know, sit around and dirtle.
Yeah.
And then
I-
finally,
Well-
carrying the spirit of Haku,
Yeah.
we have Braku, which is fusion Dragon Ball Z style of both Brandon and Haku.
Yeah, we
So-
did the fusion dance earlier, so unfortunately Haku couldn't be here for this episode. But this cow's got no beef, right? She's just a bone cow. I don't
Yeah,
like
no
that.
beef, just a bone cow.
I like beef. I don't want bone.
Yeah,
gross.
That's fair.
Never hire. No, I mean, she seems good. I mean, you can make a good bone broth out of her, but like other than that, like I always, playing against Jedza, try and do her a murder as soon as possible. I don't go super out of my way because like they've said in the previous, like earlier turns are sort of her bread and butter, but if you can snipe her on turn 1 or 2, it's like it's not great, you know? Do this cow a murder, then you get beef. Well, I guess you don't get beef, but what are you gonna do?
Where's the beef? All right, Mr. Barrows.
All right,
Bring us
talk about-
bring us to the Cloud Strife Final Fantasy VII character.
So we're gonna talk about Miku, which is what I'm gonna call this guy because I dated a girl in college whose brother was named Mikhail and she called him Miku. Miku is a guy who's really suffered from the nerfs. So his big deal is that he used to be a 2-inch engage model with Caught in the Ring, which means if you're engaged by him, you can't attack anyone but him. Which I don't know if you've ever experienced dealing with that, but it sucked, like super sucked. Mikhail is basically what a lot of crews have, which is just a 3/4/5 beater, who has some armor, so he's a little bit, resilient. I think that he is a sometimes higher. I would put him in a, okay, let me put it this way. I think he's definitely a sometimes higher in Jedza 2, probably near the bottom half of sometimes higher, because I have a hard time making room for him at 9 stones. In Jedza 1, the big thing that she does for him is that she makes him super resilient, which is something that you really want your henchman to be. So I don't think he makes it to auto-include, but I'd put him at the higher level of some matchups in Jedza 1. The biggest thing he does is that his attack always heals somebody if it hits. So he's really good at triggering Chronicles. And he's also just a 3/4/5 that sometimes does blasts. So if you have focus stacked on him, which Sophie is capable of doing, being able to like drop a severe on somebody and then drop a damage 4 blast on someone nearby is kind of a huge deal. I think again that's another reason why in Jedza 2 I don't like him as much, because Sophie's almost always focusing Jedza herself. But Mikhail, I think the other big thing with him is that he doesn't ever really have to take a walk action if you don't want him to, because his chronicle is that he pushes towards the model that healed. So turn 1, that's going to be Sophie. Turn 2, I don't know, you're going to have to kind of figure it out. But the way you get 9 stones worth of work out of this guy is you make him act as a 3/4/5 stat 6 beater that never has to take a walk action. If you can do that, if you can pull that off, and it's harder now than it used to be, because it used to be that he could teleport to whoever healed nearby. He didn't just push towards them. So it was much easier to get him into the position you wanted him to be in. Then these days, if you can use that push and you can get him up there, I think you'll get a lot of work out of him. But if you're not in a pool that is really requiring you to just like get in there and kill somebody with a stat 3 with a min 3 beater, I think 9 stones is a lot for a guy that really doesn't do much except attack. He also has Entomb, which is a really, really good shockwave, but I'm a little bearish on shockwaves generally, just because your opponent has a lot of control over which model actually gets affected by them. So
I like the Entomb line. I agree with you, Sam, but I like the Entomb line when the opponent like forgets about the fact that you have it, you know?
yeah,
Because I've run into scenarios with Mikhail, and I agree with you 100%, where this guy to me represents a model that you need to manage very carefully to get the maximum advantage out of it, which I think is effectively what you were saying as well. But I've
Yeah.
also had a couple of games where my op is thinking more around how do I stay safe from the min 3 sweeping strike, and they end up on another section of the board clumping up around an objective or something like that, and then I just entomb them, right? I mean, it is only once per activation, but you know, hitting 5 models with a blast is still pretty good.
Yeah, and Yeds is way better at stacking different types of markers around people than most crews are, so you do have that option to make Entomb's TN pretty high. But ultimately with Mikhail, I think that you really want to be in a situation where he has good targets, which not every crew has, and you want to be in a situation where the various different rules on his card are coming into play. If he's just like a generic beater, I don't think he's worth 9 stones. But if you're like, oh man, unyielding kind of matters in this matchup, or like caught in the ring really matters in this matchup, then I think I would like him a lot more. And I will say also he's crazy good against Zoraida, because he engages Zoraida and then she can't obey him and she can't obey anybody else.
I would just take that statement a little bit further and say he's good in the obey matchup.
Yeah, but how many of those are there?
Well, I mean, categorically,
A lot more
there's
now
probably
that there's
over
burns.
8 to 10 of them or something like that.
Like I
net.
think Jan Lo not so much, because it's so easy for him to reposition out of Mikhail's
You've
engagement.
got
But
like what, Hamlin? You've
Yeah.
got Huggy. You've got
There are
Yeah.
13 models in the game with Obey.
if you're playing against a matchup where the enemy is trying to offensively obey or even defensively obey their own models, just like Mikhail is just gross against that. You engage the obey model and they can't obey him or anybody else. It's real good.
Yeah. I agree.
So that's very much a some matchups model, but like I wouldn't just generically take him into anything.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Sam. I think he's an expensive model that you need to use correctly, and even when you hire him into the correct game, you really need to be on top of managing his movement through his chronicle to be able to get the most amount of value out of him effectively. So I that's kind of my take on him. I agree with a lot of the stuff you said. I've gone through the learning process with him, especially post nerf, because pre-nerf he had a 2-inch reach on a stat 6. He was, I think at the time when this model hit, he was the only min 3 beater in ES, I think.
I think
I'm
that's
not-
true.
Yeah.
Rex.
Yeah.
The only real min 3 beater in ES.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right, what do you got? What do you got, Mr. Pope?
Okay, so hear me out. Firstly, don't think the nerf is as bad as you guys are kind of making it out to be, but that's because I think it kind of changed what his role was, as opposed to like, making him just worse at what he was doing. So he's actually just a lot faster now, because he went from move 4 to move 5, and while admittedly you can't like play super the same use you could with him, because the play, obviously a 5-inch push is much worse than just a place, he still kind of can play like this weird outside of your bubble type piece that you don't really have a good one of. Some people like to use the damned as like outside your bubble in Jedza 1, but like the damned just dies if he does that. So having a lot more movement on Mikhail now to actually have a different proactive model that doesn't have to stay within 6 of Jedza 1 at all times, kind of really helpful, especially with a couple schemes like, say, what's the one where you need to deliver your highest cost guy to the deployment zone? In Your Face?
Yeah, in your face.
Like, he's a pretty decent holder for that, just because he has such good self-reliant tankiness that, you can be reasonably assured that this guy is going to live to the end of most games. And with the ability to charge something, hit them, heal them, and then continue to push past them, lets you really get a lot of extra inches of movement out.
I'll say this for Mikhail, by the way. When you're playing Jedza 2, you can have Mikhail near Jedza. Jedza, your opponent activates a model. That model gets drained by life leech. Jedza heals. Mikhail then pushes to engage the model and bodyguard Jedza so that they can't attack Jedza. I've done that. Like, it's actually incredibly strong. Like, it lets
Also,
you
we
throw
keep
Jedza.
saying push, but it's actually a move. I do
It
want
is-
to point that out.
Yeah, fair enough. But like the point is, he lets you, if you do have him, he lets you play super aggressively with Jedza 2, get in there, make those irreducible slaps, and then he just sort of pushes in at the start of an enemy model activation. Like, we're going to talk about this. I think we should talk about this generally. That one of the big advantages of Jedza 2 is that Life Leech allows you to trigger chronicle effects during your opponent's activations, and of the various chronicle effects you're triggering during opponent's activations, this is probably the best.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones where if you trigger it during your opponent's turn, and to be fair, Jedza 1 technically can do it too with her own bubble, so long as they're at low enough health. But yeah, it really does screw up someone's game plan when you throw a model in their face they weren't expecting.
A model they must attack.
I did want to say that I actually find Entombed to be one of the really second things I'm looking for when I'm thinking, do I hire Mikhail or not hire Mikhail? How useful Entomb is rather than how useful a Min 3 beater is, because I don't think he's the best damage dealer in keyword. Like, I don't even know that he's the second best model that deals damage in the keyword. Don't get me wrong, his damage is okay, but like, it's not the best thing on his card. Being able to like pulse out mass stun to your opponent, because this is Shockwave 2, not a Shockwave 1, and there's a very big difference that you wouldn't expect from just a single inch, but the amount of models you can hit with that is significantly different.
No, it's more than twice the size. Pi r squared.
Yeah, so that's pretty important for me to just kind of call out. Like, Entomb's actually really good.
It is a really good shockwave.
Yeah.
So
Can you imagine if that wasn't
when you
one
need
per
a
activation?
tanky thing that's expensive, and when you're playing Jedza 1, I think maybe you play it a bit more because you might need that tanky thing in those games a bit more. I can't really talk about Jedza 2 because I've never actually played with or against it.
And he's a good counterpunch in the Jezda 1 bubble. Like, he's a very easy way to defend your Jezda 1 bubble,
Yeah, I think maybe with Jedza 2, the big issue is just that, like, if you need a powerful, like, melee beater, like, that's what your master does.
Yeah, no, I don't think his value is as high in Jedza 2 as it is in Jedza 1. And I don't even think he's an always take for Jedza 1 either, so I think he's pretty appropriately slotted here.
All right, Braku, what do you got?
Yeah, I really like this dude. I never really got to see him play before the nerf, because like there was this weird time in Malifaux's history where the Jedza core box was completely sold out for the first like year and a half that I played this game, and then when it came back in stock, the errata had basically already hit. But no, he seems like a good model. Entomb seems really good even for a Shockwave. Like, it's move 12, which is like not the best, but it can get higher if they're near other types of terrain, or other types of markers. And like, I really like my father's legacy because I like this sort of movement-y bullshit. And being able to pull, like, I don't know, a bunch of models off of somebody for no reason and then make them have to basically deal with Mikhail seems good, So, like, yeah, seems fine. I agree.
And that's the word of the Braku.
Ooh.
All right, Mr. Barrows Fishman, take us home to the damned.
The darned. This is a model that I'm going to court controversy by saying I think is incredibly overrated by the community as a whole. The Damned is cool. Like, he has a lot of mobility. The Damned has a really kind of interestingly unique ranged attack. He has a very cool chronicle effect. The Damned is also absolutely insanely fragile and dies if you look at him funny. And that is directly in conflict with the role he wants to play of going off and doing his own thing. I would say he is a sometimes hire because nothing else in the crew does the thing he does, which is leap and scheme. But like, I do not like hiring the damned. I am not happy when I put him in a list. I'm like, I'm taking this model because it does something that I want my list to be able to do, but I'm not like excited about doing it. It feels like a tax that I'm paying sometimes. I'd put him in sometimes higher for Jedza 1, and I'd put him at very low, sometimes higher for Jedza 2, because Jedza 1 can at least compensate for how fragile he is by, her models near me don't die effect. But Jedza 2 doesn't even have that, and I just don't love how often this guy dies and how easily he dies to pretty much anything. So you take him if you're trying to score, like, I don't know, secret meetup, or like sabotage, maybe you're trying to push wagons, things that you want to be able to, interact, or if your opponent is playing models that you want to be able to hunt down, because he is tough enough that he can reasonably like hunt down sort of random ass enforcers on the other side of the table. But like, if you're sending him to hunt down something that actually fights, like Manos or other scheme runners that have some like actual significant melee power, he might just die.
Yeah.
He's not super hard to kill.
Yeah, he dies constantly in Euripides. That's like, it's like not great. I think I've almost stopped hiring him.
So I put him at low some matchups in both.
Yeah,
I'd put him below Mikhail I'd put him below Mikhail in both.
So I agree with what you're saying, but I think part of the reason why people end up in rough spots with the damned is because they look at him and they're like, oh, he's a really aggressive anti-melee schemer. I'm going to throw him out there on like a flank and he'll be able to fight for a flank or something like that. And the reality of the situation is that he just dies all the time. So what I've started to use him for is very board state dependent matchups, where there's a lot of terrain, and the leap is going to be really helpful for me to either score primaries or to score things like breakthrough, and then maybe mid-late game, if he's still alive, I can send him after like a smaller target. I've very much steered away from Goku slamming him into people's faces and hoping for the best, because 9 out of 10 times he just dies. But when you're only paying he's 8 points, I think, right? Native, unless you're taking him out.
He's 8 cents.
Because in Max, I take him and he's 9 points because his Chronicle in Max is great. But so what I've started to use him for is I've started to use him a lot more strategically, and treating him a lot more fragilely, and that has helped me get him to the end of the game. Like, for example, Sam, when you and I played in that tournament, and we were both undefeated going into playing each other, and I was on Max 2, and I actually had taken the Damned, and I was playing into your Nexus 2 crew. The reason why I took him on that board was because that board had like 70% of it covered in terrain, and I needed to be able to be mobile to get guys into position to score covert ops points. And I had a turn where the only model on my team that was going to be able to score for me that turn was the Damned. So like, that's more how I think about using the Damned, rather than at the smooth brain level when I used to take him a lot and just throw him into people and he would die, because I 100% agree with you. He gets killed by competent anti-schemers, and I think the number one example of that is actually what you already called out in Manos. I've seen Manos stab this guy to death with his spear more times than I care to count. So that's kind of my my take on him. That's what I got on him. What do you got, Pope?
All right, so here's the lecture notes, okay? When we're looking at flanking type models, this is what this is, a flanking type model. There's like 3 hierarchies of tiers or classes of flanker models, right? And the S tier flankers are going to be flankers that have access to soul stones. And that's because flankers don't tend to take a lot of hits, they take as many as they need to. And having the ability to just make that difficult on your opponent, prime flanker material, because like usually they're going to do their job, be exposed for a little bit, and then just keep moving on, and then go to do the next thing, and your opponent has one shot to get at it, and if he's going to be chasing it, he's going to basically lose whatever piece he chases it with. So in the experience you've described before with the Damned, if you do that wrong, since the Damned doesn't have access to stones, he just dies, right? So he's not an S tier flanker, but I think he's easily an A tier flanker, and here's why. He has the 246 damage track, easy access to focus, and then also crit strike. So in the next tier below, you know, your Manoses, your Aminozakos, your I'm not going to put Model 9 in there, even though that's where I kind of think of Model 9 in my own headspace, just because I think he's a little bit worse than those models. But anyways, below your like ideal flankers, you have this subclass of flankers that are just tanky enough and do a shit ton of damage, and the damage fits in there. So like he's not going to lose to any other model in this category, I don't think, just because he's going to kill them first. And then he's definitely going to do a much better job than even some of the S tier flankers do at killing what I'll call the C tier flankers, which fall into like your 5 to 6 stone minion category type models that you've hired because they're cheap, not because they're good. So the fact that you have access to free focus from your totem and cap out at 7 means you kill a lot of that like trash kind of models. And you have the added benefit of healing if you took a little bit of incidental hits before you prey on those models. So like, in my opinion, the dam kills like 1 to 2 models a game, and if you aren't killing 1 to 2 models a game with him, you're probably not getting your value out of him. Like, you want him to kill like one of your opponent's garbage flankers, score a point or 2, and then kill like your opponent's totem. And if he's dead by the end of that, you don't care. He did his job.
I think definitely I would have rated him higher in GG2. GG3 doesn't have quite as many schemes, I think, that support that playstyle, but I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely fair. And to me, I try and look at this a little bit like agnostic of the GG. We obviously have to take the GG into account, and so I agree he did lose some value now that we don't have something like symbols where like he was really important to have something like that. But even in this GG, like Ferocious Claws is just a really solid action to have for something like Covert, because flankers are still good on like covert operations for many different reasons. And I think he's probably one of the better flankers you could hire for Covert.
Yeah, this is a
outside
covert
of that
model.
like soulstoneable type model.
I mean, that was where I took him against.
And you can
against Sam.
emulate the ability to use soulstones for an admittedly exorbitant price with Flush with Cash if you really want. At which point he gets pretty tanky. But
Oh man, if you put him flush on this guy, feels so bad.
I'm not
'Cause you're-
going to disagree with that, but sometimes it's just what you need to do.
You're
But
never
anyways,
gonna
I
generate
think
a soul
he's
stone.
better than Mikhail in Jedza 1 at the very least.
Yeah, I agree.
I
with that.
couldn't comment on Jedza 2, but
I think taking the GG into account, maybe not, but maybe agnostically.
Yeah, so like obviously, you know, I play the Damned a lot in Euripides, like,
But yeah, I just don't really like the Damned in Seeker. I mean, in Jedza 1, it's kind of fine because, you know, the whole doesn't die thing. But the second you want to really use it to leap, do streams or strats or anything like that, you send it out and either you kill something by getting kind of lucky or it just dies doing nothing. But I mean, leap model's good leap model. In Jedza 2, it suffers a similar issue, except for it's way more killable. But you can play with it a little more strategically, I think. Because Jedza 2 doesn't really have a good model like it for leaping around the map. But I'm still just not the biggest fan of it because it just dies. And I feel like the rest of Seeker actually has some really good models right now, as well as the rest of Explorers, that for the most part, it rarely makes my cut for Seeker lists anymore.
I think that's a reasonable take. I love this model. When I first started playing, I thought this was like the best model ever in Jezda, and it's become more of a specific take for me for sure. And I think that's reflected in kind of all of our opinions. All
This is
right,
some home food.
Mr. Barrows Fishman, why don't you bring us around to the best girl and the best
All
birdie?
right. You can just go ahead and slot Austera and Twigge and always take in both of them. This model's fucking stupid. Like, I love Austera and Twigge. I mean, maybe I'm rating them too highly, but like, they have probably the best ranged attack in the game. It's not like a weird, like, you know, Lord Cooper ranged attack that's like the centerpiece of the model. And it's a bonus action. They filter your hand. They're just difficult enough to kill that it's a pain in the butt for your opponent, especially because they don't need to expose themselves to danger in any like meaningful sense to contribute to your game plan. They're really good at scoring marker schemes, and this GG really favors schemes where you're putting 1 or 2 markers in a specific place, and they're really, really good at that. They make your hand better. This model does everything you want. I cannot believe it is only 7 stones. It even has self-healing, and it has a good chronicle. Like Austera and Twigge's chronicle actually is one of the chronicles that you want to be triggering on yourself because it fixes your deck. And we've talked about this crew's reliance on TNs. Like Austera and Twigge is one of my biggest out of keyword hires. So if I could get them in a list for 1 stone cheaper than I normally spend, yeah, I'll take them. These models are amazing. Like absolutely, like they're so good at just hunting down like totems. They kill Orville Agassiz. They kill, you know, the copycat killer. They kill just a bunch of different totems that actually matter to their masters, and they do so from complete safety.
Yeah,
Model's great.
I love this model. I find it makes its way into the majority of my Explorer Society lists, quite frankly, regardless of keyword. If I'm being honest, I think most of my max lists have Twigge in it. It just does everything I want it to be doing at a very effective points range, and it doesn't need to put itself in harm's way to achieve what it wants to achieve, right? It can aerial strike stuff from very safe positions. It can eyes in the sky stuff from very safe positions in scenarios where you're a little light on card draw, or let's say you really need to get that extra severe for a late turn activation for a beater or something. Nature's Rejuvenation can be amazing. You know, I would say the one thing I don't generally do with her is use her Sharp Claws attack, because I try to keep her away from any types of hustle and bustle of the actual primary game. But that being said, she scores lots of points for me, picks off cheap models, and gives you card draw. And in Seeker, she's doing it for 7 points a model. Oh, and by the way, she has Scout Ahead and Unimpeded at move 6. It's pretty good. I'm very, very high on this model. I really, really, really like Austera and Twigge. I share Sam's sentiment. So, what do you got, Mr. Pope?
I feel like this is definitely a sometimes take model. There's just enough matchups where Aerial Strike is 1 damage, and when Aerial Strike's 1 damage, Aerial Strike's pretty shit, not gonna lie. And if you're not using Aerial Strike, I don't think this model gets good enough value to justify, in my opinion. Not over anything else you could hire. That's my hot take.
Yeah, I'll follow up that hot take with, I don't completely disagree with that. Obviously, ignoring Aerial Strike, sometimes Eyes in the Sky is just worth taking her for the double scheme market drop. But that's not so much in play. Yeah,
Big TN.
it's a 9, and it's not so well. It's a 9 that she filters 2 cards for, but yeah, it's. I used to be a lot more down on her actually. GG2, but with the meta shifting a bit in GG3 as well with the new Masters and Burns in particular, because I haven't really played Explorers since Burns too much. I found Aerial Strike actually has a lot more relevant targets now than it did before. Specifically, it helps shut down some early alphas by being able to pick off models before they activate. A big one being Damien. You can kill a Soulstone Gamer with it as long as you go before they get shielded. And just small plays like that can actually be like huge in those games. And in those instances, I think the value of her definitely goes up, but I'm also kind of with Landon. I'm not the biggest on auto including her.
I'll say there are some matchups where Aerial Strike is less good, but there are almost no matchups where there's no good targets for Aerial Strike. And the nature of the attack is you always get to pick whatever's the best target for you.
Yeah, I Aerial Strike obviously at a stat 6 is just stupid.
It's not just the stat 6, it's the puncture. Like Aerial Strike without puncture is way worse because it is often 1, but Aerial Strike with puncture means you can push that 5 through against hard to wound.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's just obviously unreliant because Enforcer and all that. But the biggest problem I have with Aerial Strike is kind of as Landon put it, where you just sometimes it's just ones, and if you're not investing heavily into it, you're not really getting the payoff. And it's just like, is that where your high cards are going? And in Seeker 2, most of my high cards are going to get either big irreducible damage off on with Jedza 2. Jedza 1, I actually like her. I would actually probably keep her in auto include because I feel like you don't actually send the high cards too much else. I mean, obviously you keep a severe for the big chunk of health and the damage, but overall you can actually afford to invest a lot more heavily into Aerial Strike. It's just Jedza 2. I just don't know if that's exactly where you want your cards going.
I think in
all the
Jedza
time.
1, it depends on whether you've got Goo, Damned, or Twig in some combination. I don't think you ever take all 3, but I think there's an argument for shuffling the some combination of the two around in most games.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Is I definitely think you shuffle those around, and then your card investment on where it has to go obviously changes at that point.
I mean, that's fair. I think she's a lot more value than the Damned. I would rather have her than the Damned any day. I think the Goo's tough. The Goo's tough.
Oh, easily more than Damned. I have an addiction to the Grave Goo, so I obviously put the Grave Goo above everything. But yeah, easily above the Damned.
The Damned and Twig just take up different table space, and it depends on which spot I need a model on the table that game.
Fair enough.
All right, Mr. Barrows Fishman, take us to the goo, baby.
Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure. So are we moving her, or are we leaving her where she is?
I'll leave it with Sam as final choice.
I would still leave her where she is. I think, especially we didn't really talk about the Masters that much, but I think especially with Jedza 2, the card filtering is a super big deal, because the biggest downside with Jedza 2 is that under most circumstances you have 6 cards. That's how many cards you have for the turn, and it's a very TN heavy crew. So you cannot afford to have cards in your hand that don't at least let you hit a TN. And she helps fix that.
I agree with that, honestly.
Hot counterpoint.
Mhm.
You could hire Gibson.
With the Nocturne, the spicy Gibson plus Nocturne hire.
Yeah, you forgot to tell us to put Gibson and Crypsis Core in this versatile section, Longton.
That's true.
Really dropping the ball here.
We'll talk about him at the end. It's fine. We'll just talk about him at the end. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
I think in Jedza they're not really.
No,
Maybe
that's not a real
not
thing in Seeker.
Gibson.
That's not a real thing in Seeker.
But so I think where we all landed is basically Sam and I are super high on this model, and it feels like Landon, Haku, you guys are kind of.
They really like it, but not quite as much as we.
Yeah. So I would say it's probably somewhere on the back end of auto include or the very, very top of some matchups, basically.
Sure.
In my mind.
Okay, so
right.
we'll leave it where it is. The Grave Goo. Grave Goo is, I think, the first model that we're going to put that has a different rating for the two of them. I think the Grave Goo is an auto include with Jedza 2, and I think it's a some matchups in Jedza 1. And that's going to feel weird. I think it's good. It's very high in some matchups in Jedza 1. The Grave Goo. Well, first of all, I want to preface this by saying until Wyrd issues a ruling on this, this is somewhat dependent on what your local meta rules about the Grave Goo's interaction with the Kurgan. But we're going to assume that the Grave Goo actually does make the Kurgan's aura hazardous, because if it doesn't, that's really stupid. The reason it's an auto include with Jedza 2 is that the Kurgan's an auto include with Jedza 2, and the synergy between those two models is absolutely berserk. Like giving the Kurgan's aura hazardous damage 1 and poison 1 is just like one of the rudest things imaginable, and the Grave Goo is really good at that. In Jedza 1, you're not generating huge terrain auras quite as often, so you don't necessarily have that, but the Goo is also just really fragile. Like, that's something I would caution people with. It's got fairly low health, it's an enforcer, it has low stats, and its only defense is hard to wound. It does have regen, which is really useful, but it's very easy for the people to kill the Grave Goo, and especially if it leaves Jedza's bubble, it will die immediately. Now, another reason to like it in Jedza 2 is that Jedza 2 struggles a lot more to get life tokens than Jedza 1, and the Grave Goo just reliably prints a life token every turn until it takes damage. And that's really important because you want to have those, like, you need those life tokens like turn 1. You need to cap out when you start making attacks. So the Grave Goo, you basically need it in Jedza 2 purely for the life tokens, and it also has good synergy with Off the Path because you really love pushing this thing around. You give it some shielded, you put it into terrain to make it hazardous. So you have options in that respect. The biggest thing you're doing with the Grave Goo is just abusing the absolute hell out of its rules that add hazardous abilities to terrain and also slippery, which is like an incredibly strong rule. If your opponent's playing a melee crew, it just becomes very frustrating for them to ever deal with the Goo because they have to be actually touching it, which is way more restrictive than it looks. If your opponent can shoot it off the board, though, you're going to be in a really bad position, and you need to be taking active steps to keep it safe. And so that's my take on the Goo. But and then obviously burying something is really strong. But like many bury effects that allow your opponent to hit a TN to get out, you're not going to be able to. You're not going to take something off the board and just keep it off the board forever, unless if it's already activated, that's a little different. But also the fact that it's bury is a bonus action means that you can't necessarily retry if you miss. But the Goo's great. Like it does a lot of different things. It's fairly cheap. It enables other things your crew is doing. But you just got to be aware of how fragile it is and keep it safe.
Sam, can you walk us through how you, in your brain space, often pick target priority for the goo at the beginning of a game, because what I've often realized, and also Haku, I'd be interested in this because I know you love this model too, but often what I see is you kind of need to have a business plan at the beginning of the game for the goo, given that it's fragile, given that it has a powerful berry effect. You've kind of got to single out, at least in my mind, what you're going to do, what you're going to try to go after on your ops side with that berry. I struggled with that initially when I was playing with this model for a while to be able to use it effectively. So I'd love to hear both Haku and Sam, your guys' thoughts on this, given that you guys love this model.
I'm very opportunistic with the berry, because if you like decide like this is the target I need to bury and you just run the goo at it and bury it, you're just gonna lose it. It's super fragile. There's a ton of stuff they can use to kill it. I bury stuff opportunistically, like stuff that gets separated from the rest of the crew and isn't able to, get rescued by its friends. That's fine to pick off, but like I'm not gonna wait for the best possible target. I'm gonna get up there and I'm gonna just eat something. Like I'm gonna eat something if I can, because if I do, and the thing is, this crew doesn't capitalize on it in the way that like Justice or Terra does. You don't have other models that can attack buried models. It's pretty much just the goo. So I'll bury something if it like gives me the opportunity to do so, but it's pretty rare that I'm gonna be like, my mission for this game is to bury this dude with the goo.
That for me, it's I do one more point of damage. I don't think you're ever really going for. I obviously, if people watch some of the older games I played at Ivan, where I hired Grave Goo into that a lot, is because you can give it fast focus. New Explorers model looks like it'll also be a decent option to pick to maybe take in that crew for the same reasons, is because essentially it's kind of like a stat. It's basically almost a 7 damage severe, right? Like one of the highest in the games.
What new model, Haku? Sorry, just call it out by name. So
Tiri.
The new master who just gives fast focus.
Burnout. Yeah, she has burnout.
Really easily. I think Grave Goo will always be a decent option for any like crew that wants to alpha and explorers, and because you have Jin Baccara, with the pass token, alphaing is obviously better. Because you're able to go with 2 models in a row in order to do it. And that being said, he's always one of the best because you basically have a 7 damage severe if you take into poison. If you have mask, you can do 8 damage. It's a pretty brutal model for that reason, and you're able to go basically anywhere because you're unimpeded. I think, I don't have much of a target choice. It's mostly just opportunistic as well. I mean, obviously, if you can kill something, you kill it, and I am more willing to throw Grave Goo's life away in that kind of play.
Yeah, so what you're both saying is basically, because it's so fragile and because you like to use the model so much, you look for the path of least resistance with which to use it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, passive least resistant, or wherever you can end the model on a big piece of terrain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's a big
very, very dependent on the board. And it's also like, what I like, we were talking about flankers earlier, and one advantage that the Grave Goo has versus other flankers is that it doesn't go up and fight other flankers, it swallows them in its tummy. And then the flanker's not there anymore and can't do anything on the board. That's a huge deal. Like, you're not like the damned can engage and kill other flankers, but like if you're laying the damned, right, and your opponent is running with some other flanker type model, and maybe the battle's going against them, they can just get away. One of the things that makes flanker models very good is how maneuverable they are. They can just run away. You can't run away if you're in the goo's tummy. You're stuck.
Yeah, literally one of the best things I think we'll see in GG3 with the goo is we're seeing a lot of like new big beefy models that just like sitting on center points, and it's going to be great at walking up to that model, burying it in its belly, and then charging backwards into like a piece of terrain, and maybe even walk charging backwards. And you're basically paying, you're just a cheap kidnap 33. And the best part of doing it with this model is you get your big damage hit, you get your bury, and you pop it out onto terrain almost always, right? And because slippery, you're always able to pretty much charge whoever you want and get out without being in engagement, as well as being able to place a model into absolute terrain that's going to be hazardous 1 poison 1. I mean, it's such an annoying model for removing like the key special important model people like having in the middle. It's great against Jedza for that specific reason.
Yeah,
like
very good
You
counter.
just nom Jedza 1 and just like, okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Mr. Pope, I guess you got the final wraparound on this one. What you got for us, my friend?
Yeah, so it's important to note that in addition to just being useful in Jedza, like the berry thing is actually pretty useful tech against things like Leviticus or other models that have to place in order to resolve their I don't die demises. And so those are the only times I think you really have to look specifically for I need to bury this model at some point during this game. Other than that, I think you guys mostly covered it pretty well. One last thing I might point out is that if you want more Chronicle effects, what you can do is charge and just tap this guy lightly with some sort of model to try and proc stuff. Like if you took Mikhail, you could just charge this guy, smack him, heal him with Mikhail's built-in heal for the attack, and just proc Chronicles just while you're walking out of deployment.
Yeah,
So-
that's a Jedza 1 thing. Jedza 2, you want it at full health, so you're getting those life tokens. It's so important for Jedza 2.
But it's just a thing you can do.
No, very true.
Fair enough. All right, the Kurgan.
So the Kurgan is, I would say in Jedza 1, I have a hard time with this one. I'm not totally certain. I think it's probably some matchups Jedza 1, although maybe always. I could be talking to auto-include, but it'd be like high up in some matchups in Jedza 1. Jedza 2, this is huge auto-include. Biggest auto-include. Put it above the goo in Jedza 2. This model is stupid in Jedza 2. Jedza 2's thing that she's trying to do is slap the hell out of people with Death Touch, and she just wants to spend all her AP doing that. And so the Kurgan is basically just a shuttle that like carries her around and puts her on the part of the board that she wants to be on, and then is like, yes, mistress. The other thing that it's really good at is the Kurgan is the only thing in the crew that does AoE healing, which is important because it lets you both, for Jedza 2 at least, it lets you both trigger Chronicles, but at the same time trigger overhealing, which she wants you to be overhealing so she can, she can get her life tokens. And there's always sort of an inherent tension when you're building a Jedza 2 list and how when you're playing the Jedza 2 list that like, do I want to heal a model that's damaged and trigger Chronicles, or do I want to heal a model that's at full and get a life token? And this model does both because it AoE heals. It's also just like an armor 2 model with a good attack and like a reasonable amount of health and a reasonable cost, and it has just an absolutely absurd amount of displacement. It abducts enemy models really well with Whirlpool. It just is really, 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 really good. I don't know if it's auto-included in Jedza 1 because she doesn't care so much about abducting enemies. She doesn't care so much about the AoE healing quite as much. But it's still just like a really aggressively costed armor 2 beater. So yeah, the Kurgan's just really, really good in Jedza 2. Like you just can't build a list without it. And in Jedza 1, I don't play Jedza 1 as much, but I think it's just probably gets there just on like the fact that it's a really good card.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't disagree with anything you said. I think a couple of points that I can add on to this. You've kind of touched on some of this, but I've played the Kurgan primarily in Jezda 2 because I primarily play Jezda 2. Unless there's like a really good application for Lost Knowledge out of Jezda 1, or like something like the Bubble is just really good against a certain matchup, then I would lean into Jezda 1. But I mean, Avalanche is an insanely good ability. The free real estate that you get out of Shifting Earth for just activating the Kurgan is really, really good. I found it incredibly helpful in flipping Jezda 2 up the board for a whole lot of free movement.
That's an insane amount of displacement.
Yeah, it's a 50 millimeter base with 3 inches on either side with a place. I mean, that's
plus the
net.
the base width of the model you're moving.
Yeah. So, and Jezda 2 is on a base width of 40 mil. So, and then like it's got armor 2s, like Sam said. It's got unimpeded, which is awesome. Another trick that I've actually done a couple times and I've been a cheeky little lad with is avalanching an enemy out of position to make it easier for the goo to isolate it, basically. And you can like avalanche a model through a piece of impassable or like a wall, separate it from its buddies, and then go after it. I've done that a couple of times with really, really strong effects, and then just like run away with the goo like top of next activation or something, basically. I've done that before a lot. Yeah, I'm really high on this model. I like it a lot for all the reasons that Sam said and all the stuff that I talked about. I would probably put it very similar to where Sam put it, kind of like mid-tier auto-include in Jezda 2, if not high-tier auto-include in Jezda 2. And then it's a very good some matchups model in Jezda 1, in my opinion. And that's kind of where I'm at. Mr. Pope, what do you got?
I really like the Kurgan in general just for being able to move around your bubble in Jedza 1 outside of its activation. That's one of those things that's just kind of pretty big as something you want to be able to do. So it's helpful for that reason. Sometimes I even take treasure map to try and help that out just so you have that extra bit of positioning.
Ooh, I like that. That's fun.
So it's really neat in that context. And Avalanche is just really good for trying to set up like aggressive turns. So I agree, it's definitely like near auto include for Jedza 2. Since alphaing isn't like super part of your game plan for Jedza 1, it's probably in some matchups pretty fairly. But it is also just really nice to be able to relocate your bubble outside of, Jedza's own activation. So
yeah,
I think we're about to hit the mark on it here.
I'll tell you the few simple reasons why I think it's auto-include in Jedza 1 as well, though. Ignoring the fact that there's no official ruling on how Grave Goo interacts with generated auras, but, if it does work, obviously having the two together is just cracked to have a aura 3 poison damage 1. Which is disgusting and always will be disgusting. But the other important thing about the Kurgan's aura, for specifically Jedza 1, is its severe impassable concealing. So it hits 3 pretty nasty abilities for Jedza 1's Life of the Earth ability, which normally I'm not a big fan of TN abilities, but because it hits move, you have pretty decent ways of giving out staggered, a guaranteed one on Jedza herself with just, a 5 of Crows or a Soulstone. You're able to just Life of Earth the Kurgan 3 times, and it's pretty fucking nasty to do that when he's inside the enemies, and just giving out 3 damage distracted and staggered. Like, it's just, oh my god, it's just so annoying. I had that hit with me once, and just like my whole crew, you can only afford to cheat past it so many times, and the second you fail one, now you're staggered, and now you're taking your TN13 move duels at like stat 4 or stat 3. And it's just like, oh, how many 9s and 10s can you pass out to not take 3 damage? I think that part of the Kurgan really makes it all pretty much auto-include for me nowadays in Jedza 1, now that I've seen how well the Life of Earth playing Jedza works. And I think it actually really works pretty well.
And you can dredge it up in Jedza 2. You can dredge up the Kurgan once it's being treated as a marker, which is, oh god, it's really mean.
Yeah. So for that reason, I do definitely think the Kurgan is basically auto-include for me in Jedza 1, especially because right now point control is just huge in GG3. So having a model where it's just like, all right, you come in 2 inches of this guy who pretty easily moves around and is also just generally annoying himself and really hard to kill by himself, and a crew that heals him, and it's like, oh, well, fuck.
Yeah. All right, that's the Kurgan.
Tannenbaum.
So now Tannenbaum. Poor Tannenbaum. So, I don't know. This is one of the areas where I think the granularity kind of hurts us a little, but I would put him in never hire. I don't think you'd literally never hire Tannenbaum, but like, it's so hard for me to think of a situation where this guy is the best way for me to spend 8 stones. Like, so Tannenbaum has Ink Fingers is a really, really strong ability. I'm going to start with that. So that's the argument for putting him in some matchups is because there are matchups where Ink Fingers like matters when your opponent's trying to sculpt a good hand. His ability to like change your scheme is extremely bizarre, and it's also an ability that just like it'll come up sometimes. It's not useless, but usually you pick the scheme because it's a scheme your crew's good at scoring. So you're trading a scheme that you picked because you were good at scoring it for a scheme that you didn't pick because you aren't going to be as good at scoring it, and it's also takes a 13 out of your hand, which is a real card. And beyond that, he kind of doesn't do a lot. Like, he's got a reasonable ranged attack, but it's not great. And I don't know, I'm just not thrilled by him. Like, it's 8 stones is a lot. These lists tend to be very tight. I often, when I'm building Jedza lists, I'm not like looking for ways to fill the list. I'm actively looking for stuff to cut.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%.
Yeah. So, yeah, never hire, unfortunately. Sorry, guy.
Womp womp womp. I don't hate this model, I think, as much as, or I'm not as low on this model as you are, Sam, but I am pretty low on it. I agree with pretty much everything he said. Again, you were the guy that taught me how to play Seeker, so shocker there. But I will say, as a devil's advocate for Rewrite the Story, I don't see Rewrite the Story as a primary reason you hire this guy. I see rewrite the story as a oh shit button that you just have to push sometimes if your plan just gets foobarred. And that's always how I've interpreted that component on Tannenbaum. I mean, it also needs a 13. You need a 13 for that to go off, right? Because it's how does basic math work here?
Yeah, it's a 13.
Minus 5. Yeah,
You need a 13.
yeah, you need a 13 for that to go off. So for me, a lot of the times, if I'm taking him, it's because I see value out of something like an ancient words that he has. Ink fingers, I think, is the strongest thing he's doing. Probably also with Chatty. Chatty is good, but then the problem is he's kind of easy to kill too. So, and he's also 8 points. So if you're hiring a Tannenbaum, it's like we have Tannenbaum at home, which is like just better models for the same points costs that do just better things. Like Kurgan is better, Ooze is better, Twigge is better, Damned is better. All of these models that are in the 7, 8, 9 point range are just, in my opinion, going to get you a lot further and get you a lot more mileage than Mr. Tannenbaum here. He's not unplayable. I like playing him, I like using him, but I just think he doesn't bring as much to the table for his point costs when you're considering how strong these other 7 and 8 and 9 model option hires are. And I agree with Sam. I find the same thing in my secret key lists. It's not, oh, how do I fill this list out? It's, I'm trying to make room for other models often. And because of that, for me, Tannenbaum rarely makes the cut. But maybe I'm wrong. Pope, what do you got?
No, never hired this guy. He doesn't have anything on his card that's really worth it. The only thing I've ever heard of with people talking about using this guy is trying to reuse Severes with his heal thing with a trick that doesn't work anymore. So I'm not even gonna bring it up. I don't know. I don't like him.
Yeah. There was one. Rewrite the story is the only reason you play this card. I believe in the beta it was like a 12 was needed and it was cracked, like legitimately kind of cracked.
I think it might have at one point been as low as an 11, but 13 is just way too high.
It was pretty low, and so therefore it's pretty easy to consistently get it off. And at that point, it's really great because obviously you bring Vendetta. Vendetta fails. Whip. There's a lot of really good things you can do with that. Or you're in a winning position and you didn't think you would be. Bring Vendetta in, kill the guy, get your points.
Yeah. But
GG0, yeah. GG3, I don't think switching schemes works as well anymore. I mean, it could be pretty nice to just like secret text, like secret meetup, where you just like, oh, I actively have that completed right now. I'll just switch into that scheme, name the models I need to name, and it's pretty good because you get to pick your chosen models then. So there's actually quite a few cute little things you can do with it in GG3. Now that I think about it, the problem is it's a 13, it's unreliable, and oof a doof. You have to get stuck with this model for the rest of the time because of that. So if it was a little cheaper, you could almost argue it, just because it's just a broken ability. It really does have to be at like a 13, otherwise it's too game warping. Kind of like what they did in my Poi Boy Toshiro. Like summoning Ashigaros was disgusting. You make it inconsistent by needing a 12, it's no longer disgusting because you just can't rely on it, and therefore the rest of the model's pretty much dead.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a 13 because ultimately what Rewrite the Story does is it digs you out of a hole you dug for yourself. So I really don't like spending 8 stones on a model and then spending a 13 later in the game to like unfuck my plan.
No, I really do think you're looking at that wrong. You're not digging yourself out of a hole. You're literally just jumping into something else that's opportunistic. Like, because of all the secret writing schemes we have right now, the ability to just, I think Secret Meetup is just a great example. Sometimes you can look at the board and just be like, this literally gets scored. Would you spend a 13 to just score a free point? And the answer is hell yeah, you would. I mean, it's
yeah, I agree with Hoxie right
and
here.
So there's so many schemes in GG3 that do that.
I wouldn't spend 8 stones to theoretically later in the game spend a 13 to score a point.
Right, because it's just, if it wasn't a 13, it was a reliable ability to get off, you would easily hire this model so much more. It's an unreliable ability, the rest of the card's not great, and therefore it's just like, if it works like 25% of the time, then you're just kind of like screwed.
Yeah, what I'm saying
but
is,
if this card's ever working like 75% of the time, oof.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, like, I would spend a 13 to opportunistically score a point. I would spend 8 stones to opportunistically score a point. I would not spend 8 stones to get the opportunity to spend a 13 to opportunistically score a point.
That's a lot of maybes in a row there for me, to be honest.
Yeah, that's its problem. It's just too many maybes.
You're saying this thing used to be an 11 to trigger that? That's fucking
In the beta,
awesome.
maybe.
Yeah,
That's
it was something
really
pretty
good.
low, and it was a very disgusting model because of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. If that's an 11, you might even be able to flip that at that point. That's
All right,
that's good.
hypothetical here. Does this action can only be taken during Tannenbaum's activation stop you from mimicking it? I think it does.
Yeah, because
It's not during Tannenbaum's activation.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, the way mimic effects work, you don't change the name of your model.
I'm just in magic mode. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not that this card.
It would work in magic.
yeah.
All
It
right.
would. All right,
Sorry.
let's talk about Lamplighters. We have spent enough time on that sad boy. Lamplighters are, I would say, in Jedza 1, probably some matchups. The big thing that Lamplighters do is that they fix your TNs. This crew, as we've mentioned, has a lot of TNs, and that plus twist on lit lamps is a big deal. In Jedza 2, I just don't love them. Like, the thing with Lamplighters is that they do not heal very effectively. You have to relent to their attack to make sure it hits, or it just becomes basically another TN. And if you relent, then you're flipping 3 cards and picking the lowest for how much you heal, even if you're near a marker, so you're healing 1. So 7 stones is steep to like heal a model for 1. If you're lighting lamps and you're getting benefits from them because you have all these TNs you want to hit, and I think Jedza 1 has more TNs because she's trying to hit ancient knowledge or lost knowledge or whatever. She's trying to hit grab from the pack. She's trying to hit all this crap. Then yeah, but like in Jedza 2, there are both fewer TNs and the lists, in my experience, are tighter. So I would never hire. I went through a period of hiring them in Jedza 2. I liked them, and then I just like played more games, and I was like, this is just not a good use of my stones. So I stopped hiring them, and I felt better.
Is that the word of the Barrows Fishman?
That's me.
I feel I really like Lamplighters primarily because I have all of mine painted as the mages from Final Fantasy. So I've got one of them painted as the red mage, one of them painted as a white mage, and one of them painted as a black mage. And I'm a huge simp for Final Fantasy VII, and just the Final Fantasy series. So I look for excuses to play these guys. But I think a lot of the times for me, they end up kind of slotting into cheeky counterattack, or if I have the extra points, I wouldn't consider them like a go-to core facet of the lists, especially because when I've tried to use them, they tend to encourage me to do bubble ups so that I can get the pluses from the light the lamp markers. And I've kind of played myself a bunch of times where I've tried to get lots of value out of those plus flips, and then I just end up clumping my crew up together and losing out on being able to score scrats or schemes because I wanted to make sure that I got 5 or 6 free plus flips over the course of 2 turns or something like that. And that's really fucked me over a couple of times. So I'm not sure if that's really more of a Doug Grecker playing Malifaux poorly thing, or if that's like what the Lamplighters are trying to do from a primary buff standpoint isn't as good thing. Maybe it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, but I still think they have value. I certainly don't put them at the level of like Tannenbaum, but I also don't put them at the level of like the Ooze or Kurgan, basically. That's kind of my take on it. Mr. Pope?
Yeah, so in Jedza 1, I think you definitely want at least one of these. And I think in matchups where you don't have to move all too much, they get a lot more value. But I don't know that you ever play Jedza 2 or even necessarily Jedza 1 in those types of matchups. But I think in a GG where Don't Mind Me is important, which I don't think this GG is, their value goes up a bit too. And Shimmering Lights is just a little neat bit of defensive tech that I think is easy to overlook how good it is, just because it makes it very difficult to take focused attacks on these guys. But overall, I'm pretty mid on them. I would say that they're probably appropriately placed for 2. I would probably move them up in 1. Like, I think you're usually hiring one of them in 1. I might say they're auto-include, even though I don't think they're the best models in the game. They just kind of like do things you want.
I can be convinced on that. Like Jedza 1 has a lot of TNs, and that's what they're for. They're for fixing your TNs. Like
Yeah,
everything else.
A lit lamp marker during your unpack is just so good, because even if you're not necessarily needing it to pass TNs, it also just helps you hit more triggers. Depending on what models you're hiring, like sometimes you just have extra triggers you want during your unpack. And
Yeah,
that's really good.
everything these guys do that's not a lit lamp marker is secondary to the fact that they make you pass your TNs. That's the heuristic you should use to evaluate them.
And the positives to defense is also just really good sometimes when you're playing in boards where a lot of the action happens in like one spot. Because it's not only your activations that you get the plus flips.
No,
it's every
I know it's
activation,
pretty
so,
sweet. That part's pretty sweet.
But yeah, I don't think I have a lot to say about them other than that.
Yeah, no, same. I'm pretty much exactly the same. The only thing I would love to them change is that the heal flip is a 1-2-3 heal flip that suffers no negatives. Maybe against friendly models only. Just man, they really need to be able to actually heal 1-2-3.
That ability specifically feels like when they were writing it, Wyrd kind of forgot the way the rules work.
Yeah. It really does kind of feel like it was meant to be able to heal your models reliably 1-2-3, and it just doesn't. The lit lamp marker for unpacks is pretty much its only solid point. The fact that marker removal is more common means you can't really even be aggressive with lamp markers, and using them defensively is that much harder. One of the big things I would do with it would be like hire Crypsis core models back in the day and just have long range snipers with more plus flips, which was cool, but I don't know. They're just, there are just better things to do nowadays. And I definitely think 1 in Jedza 1 is going to still be pretty common for TN flips, but that's about it.
All right,
You
I have a
probably
question
never
for you
hired
guys.
to.
Can you choose to heal for just 1 and not do the heal flip? Like, I'm pretty sure you have to do
no.
the heal flip,
No,
right?
You have to do the heal flip, and this really bites me. It really annoys me because it's so many times I just like flip like 3 severes to it, or I flip a red joker to it, and I'm just doing it for the movement at that point, or to try to create a dim lamp marker, and you just like, oh, there go all my cards.
Yeah. Okay.
I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, I don't
Anyway.
even think I'd mind the neg flip if there wasn't a
Do you
TN on
hate
it.
that flip, or what about the flip where you black joker twice in a row to lose a game at that tournament round for Captain Con last year? Which do you hate more, that or the other one?
Let's not rub it in.
Yeah, just messing with you. Just
All
messing with you, Haku.
Anyways, the Moorwraiths
Are bad.
Yeah, they're bad. You'll summon them in Jedza too. Like, you're gonna summon them to put them next to the table. You're not gonna spend stones on this model. Like, what are you, stupid?
What are you,
spend-
stupid?
Yeah, you know what? Fuck you. I'll spend stones on this model. I'm aggressive. I'm jumping the pecking order just to be like, nah. If Grave Goose works the way it should work, this model at a 4 cost is cracked.
No, the aura is too small and the thing's too fragile. The Kurgan works because it's beefy and because its aura is gigantic. These guys have a tiny aura and they die if you sneeze at them.
They're
It's
4
not-
They
soul
don't
stones.
in Jetsa 1.
Yeah,
And
they
if
don't
you
in
can
Jetza 1.
stack the auras because they're different terrain auras, the
Yes.
Kurgan and the Moorwraith, you get suddenly multiple pings off of your trail of slime.
So
There you go.
Here's the thing. Even if that worked, right? And I actually do think that should work because that's how I believe Trail of Slime works. Even if that worked, I like the number one way to like crack Jedza 1's bubble if you can't displace her is make her spend her life tokens resurrecting like stupid shitty 4-stone minions. That's what these things are. Like, you know what's way better than spending a 4-stone minion or a life token to resurrect like a crappy Moorwraith? Just kill somebody by hiring a real model. These things are terrible. Like,
I don't think I've ever seen anyone run out of life tokens, even hiring more wraiths.
Also,
I
if you
don't
kill them, they get a life token. I mean, the simple fact of like, man, just if that's where you want to spend your high cards in Severe to kill my 4 so-so Moorwraith, I should be winning on the rest of the board in Jedza 1.
you don't need to spend high cards and Severes to kill them. That's the point. They're very fragile.
Not really. You'll get
They're
a
armor
decent
ones.
amount of shielded just by proccing Chronicles in your crew, and then they're also just going to get armor 1-4, so you have to hit them for 5. I
Look,
mean, that's not like easy.
I get where you're coming
2
from.
min 3s don't kill them. Like, it's not. Well, 2 min 3s kill them obviously if they've never moved.
if they
but
have not been shielded that turn, right? If they haven't moved that turn. I
Yeah.
get where you're coming from. I find that Jedza lists are very tight. I don't often have room for a bunch of spare stones. I think that Moorwraiths, like what you're setting up, is kind of a cute idea, which is basically the Grave Goo pinball machine. I don't love investing a ton of stones in the Grave Goo pinball machine when it doesn't work if anything happens to the goo, and when it doesn't work if your opponent has like the ability to deal with it from range, when it doesn't work if they can ignore hazardous. So many things make that not work, and it just feels like you're gimmicking it. And there are the crew is not, I think, strong enough to like play silly gimmicks. It's a fine crew. I think it wins games, but like I would rather just take good models and win the game with them. I get where you're coming
all
from.
the qualifiers you just threw on it are qualifiers that I would normally apply to Jedza 1 to begin with.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I agree with Landon. I mean, you're 100% right. They're just going to be those times when you're playing against a crew you know doesn't have great range, and you know they're going to have to go in and they can't ignore hazardous terrain, and that's when it's good.
Okay, so I guess in Jedza 1, I'd put them at the very bottom of some matchups. You sold me on it, but that is damning.
Yeah,
with faint
two
praise.
you summon them, so you never need to hire them.
Yeah, you never hire them in Jedza 2. We're not going to talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, wait, hold on. To be fair, you play with them. You just don't spend points on
Yeah,
them,
that's fine. You don't spend points on them.
right? Like,
It's not says never played, Doug. It says never hire.
yeah, I guess that's fair. That's fair. Now, can you guys talk a little bit about? So one of the things that I've had to think about and get good at with Jezda 2 is where and how and when to hire the Moorwraiths, or sorry, summon. So what my kind of MO has been traditionally to try to get a Moorwraith out on turn 1 with her, and then if I have the ability to, when opportune, do it in like the later turns. Do you guys think about that differently at all in terms of the specific summoning mechanic of bringing them onto the field via Jezda 2? I'd be curious about that. Gentlemen?
Nah, it's pretty much the same. I mean, sometimes you have to seriously think, like, am I willing to throw a life token at this, or, a soul stone or whatever?
Right,
And you'll just think, no, it's not necessarily even worth having.
because you want to use it for her punch. Because you want to use
Yeah,
it for
also
punch.
just like giving your opponent pass tokens and a model to kill to get activation control is something you have to actively think about as well. And a geode marker is pretty nice to just have a guaranteed hazardous marker where you could throw it into the person. Like if the Moorwraith's not like, if you're not summoning it next to the goo and you would just rather have the geode marker for guaranteed hazardous damage, that's so good. So what you bring up is a pretty fair point. Like turn 1 where you're not necessarily even dropping the shockwave on an enemy, obviously get your Moorwraith. Other turns, it's like, holy shit, pushing a geode marker into a guy to guarantee ping 1 and then attack him is, probably better.
What I've found with them summoning them, especially in later turns, is that the number one consideration is summoning a dude or summoning a Moorwraith such that my opponent's model is now in hazardous or now in difficult terrain, severe terrain. That's actually a big consideration because the area around them, even if the goo's not around, is always severe.
Yeah.
So your opponent's got something positioned, they've got a position just the way they want it, and now all of a sudden it's stuck in severe. That sucks for a lot of people. Like that's rough. That's a rough situation to be in.
Yeah, that is another important thing to keep in mind.
Mr. Pope, or sorry, actually, Mr. Pope, what do you got? Any closing comments on this one?
Again, as I said, don't really have too much experience with the title, having never actually seen it on the other end of the table. So I really don't have a lot of actual helpful insights on this one, to be honest.
Well, fair enough for me. That's the
All I
one
know
thing
is
I
the
might know
title.
more about Malifaux than you in this one specific case. Then I'll take it. All right, we go into surveyors. Let's do some surveying, Mr. Barrows.
I don't like surveyors. I'm willing to be talked off of this, but I don't think I ever hire a surveyor, neither Jedza. I mean, they're cheap. The surveyor's big thing was chain gang. Chain gang's a really good rule. It just feels like it's been totally surpassed by the Kurgan. Like the Kurgan just does that. Surveyors do other stuff. Earthquake's kind of cool. Pythagorean Quake is not something that really happens. They make geodes, but Jedza 2 makes geodes. So they're like definitely, I think, a never hire in Jedza 2. In Jedza 1, I guess I can see if you want these geodes, but like she also doesn't abuse geodes in the way that Jedza 2 does. I don't know. I just find the surveyors, they're reasonably tanky, right? They're reasonably mobile. They do a bunch of like interesting things, but lists are tight and there's a lot of like really cool models in this keyword that have like cool unique effects, and it's just tough for me to fit in a 6-stone minion that doesn't really do a lot of damage and isn't really exceptionally tanky and like costs me cards without adding any to my hand. I don't know. I'm willing to be talked off it. I just don't like them. I'd say maybe some matchups. How about this? In Jedza 1, I'll put him in some matchups. I'll put him above Moorwraiths out of spite.
Sam, so basically what you're saying is for 2 more points, why wouldn't you just spend it on a Kurgan? Effectively, is that kind of where your brain space is at?
It's just the way my lists shake out. It's tough for me to be like. It's rare that I'm in a position where I'm like, I have a slot that I need to fill with something that costs 6 stones and doesn't kill things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's totally. I like Surveyors a bit more than you like them, but I'm not gonna. This ain't the hill I'm dying on for sure. But Field of Steel has saved my caboose many times. Fight for early activation, trigger Field of Steel, profit has been a line that has been very strong for me in the past in at least 3 or 4 games that I can think of. Other than that, I'm not really sure what else this model does for me specifically that I couldn't get out of, say, the Kurgan or some other models in Jezda's crew that are maybe just a little bit better. I've tried a couple of cheeky lists before where you hire like 3 surveyors and just like make giant Field of Steel bubbles, but it's not that good. And I think the other point that I want to call out on this model specifically is that it has 4 willpower, and 4 move. So the problems abound potentially depending on your opponent and depending on how often they can take advantage of those things. So that's kind of my take on it. I like the model. I certainly will hire them. I don't think they're top tier in terms of taking, and I probably often don't end up with more than maybe 1 of them.
I can never see myself hiring more than 1 ever. I only have 1 painted.
All right, here's my case for Surveyors. All right, firstly, I don't think this is one of those models that's just going to get power crept as your collection grows. But when you're on a small collection, you own just Jedza, maybe not even Jedza 2, but you own the entire keyword. You're going to play these guys sometimes, right? They make reasonable martyr targets. They make reasonable public demo if you decide one day you want to choose violence and play public demo. And I don't even think they're terrible for like stuff like Secret Meetup where you need to have 2 things in the same spot, because they can bring your opponent's stuff to places or push your stuff to where it needs to go. The whole like big thing you're doing with these guys is usually actually hitting your own stuff and not hitting enemies, which sounds kind of weird, but they're one of the tools you can use for your unpack in Jedza 1 to put damage on your own guys while still doing something useful. They can hurt themselves firstly to just get stoots like Mass Hysteria to push your guys up the board, especially in stuff like Corner where your crew's not actually that fast, but these guys can really help get key pieces up the board much more quickly. And they do all of this without needing a single TN, because you just have the built-in mask for price of progress on your surveillance tools, and Chain Gang has no TN. So they have a very card burdenless, efficient way to move your dudes around the board, and sometimes that's just really helpful. I don't think like on a competitive sense that's something you need when you're playing this crew, because you're playing this crew in a very specific connotation. But like, if you're just playing Seeker every game for like an entire year, I think you'll put these guys on the table more than once and not feel bad about it.
Mr. Haku?
That about sums it up. Definitely a perfectly okay-ish model if you don't have any of the other good Explorers models. And then you can just immediately replace them with pretty much any of those. Jin, Crypsis, any like generic model I think is better than these. I think Doug, you hit on the nail. 4 willpower, especially in the day and age where willpower attacks are pretty common, is just kind of trash.
Yeah, they're getting way more common, right? Like a lot more models that are coming out are having willpower attacks.
Yeah, there are just so many of them now, and 4 move is even like really bad. I mean, sure, you can be like, oh, they have chain gang to move more. It's like, yeah, but movement attacks now are like becoming a lot more common. So you have to watch out for that as well. Even against Seeker itself, the movement TNs are not uncommon. I would never hire this model anymore if you have a full collection, and can just literally have other models to choose from. The geode markers are likely to just get picked up if you can even create them in, convenient zones. The fact that they're created means you can't even put them in base contact with enemy models. You don't have very easy ways of pushing them in Jedza 1 even. So it's just like, what are you playing around for? I really can't think of it. The funniest thing to me is they actually kind of work with Crypsis cores, because you can just make the geode inside their aura, and that's funny. To have an aura 3 damage thing. So it's kind of funny to do that in like other games where you're hiring corruption scores, but otherwise, nah. And now you can just do that in Jedza 2 with, just per bonus, which you probably want to use much more aggressively. But whatever. I would never hire these models.
All right, so let's talk about Yaksha.
Yaksha.
So these are the only models on this list I've literally never played with. They're cool. I mean, this is purely speculative, so I'm gonna try to keep it short because it's like probably not as helpful to you guys. I think I would put these in sometimes higher in both of them. Like Yaksha are cool. Like they've got 5-stone minion problems, right? Like 5-stone minion problems are at this point in the game's life cycle are like fairly well known. Like that's enough stones that you're like it's a real amount of stones, but also like these models tend to be fragile. They tend to be low impact. They're easily picked up by your opponent for activation control. Yaksha have some healing. They have I don't remember what kind of they have vengeance, so like it doesn't it feels kind of bad to hit them. They're surprisingly mobile. They move without a TN on a bonus action, hallelujah, and it's really easy to set up the difficult terrain for them to jump to. I don't think their attack is particularly high impact, but they're a significant model with a suit like flipless leap. That feels like something that could be real, right?
That feels like reasonable,
No.
right?
Nope.
All right, so I have 1 point where I think that these guys are reasonable, but the 5-stone minion problem, I'm on board with you, Sam. I agree. I think that that's a very salient point. You're giving up a fairly juicy target to your opponent that they can probably take off the board and gain activation control pretty quickly on you. Now, the one thing I want to call out here is look to the board. If there's any vassal-sized pieces of massive, severe terrain, like a huge forests, then I would say that these guys get a heck of a lot better. Because at that point, tangling roots on like a giant patch of forest or multiple giant patches of forest is some real serious displacement, right? And a good ability. But lacking that, it's probably I'm not super excited about it because you can kind of pick them off pretty easy and they're only move 4. But I do think that they've got a space in lists as a tech piece for large patches of severe, but that's about all I got right now because I also haven't played with these guys yet officially. So,
Alright. So there's this asterisk in the bottom left that says subject to change. So my evaluation is subject to change, but here's why you play these guys. I think it's only in Jedza 2 and only if you're too lazy to hire Vatagi Huntsman, who we'll talk about later. The tome trigger on their attack is not enemy only, so you can just make hungering landmarkers with any tome in your hand. And hazardous markers are really good with dredge up. It's just an extra point of damage on whatever attack you're making. It's not bad. And then you also happen to put them inside a hazardous piece of terrain, which is not destructible, unlike geodes, which you might think you might be able to use instead. You don't go inside geodes. Geodes aren't severe, and they are destructible. So you can even just get rid of them if you don't like them. These things can just really quickly populate the board with fucking hazardous terrain. It's also not once per activation either, and it's drop, so you can stack them up too. I don't think you ever take these things in Jedza 1. I think they're like very much against what you want to do in Jedza 1. But like, if you just want to make a shit ton of hazardous markers somewhere, if you have like if you decide to take Lamplighter for some reason too, like you can even fish for that tome harder. So I don't know. I think that's their main use case for me, just looking at them, because they also say that your friendly seeker models don't get killed by that hungering landmarker. Didn't give you any other hungry landmarkers, but the ones you make at least won't kill you. So you can create patches of just hazardous that are really nasty.
So is your spicy take that these are poor man's Vatagi Huntsman, basically?
Basically, except Vatagi Huntsman even make destructible terrain too. So like, I don't even know if they're poor man's. I think they fill a similar space.
Vatagi Hunt. We're gonna get to Vatagis. We'll talk about them. I'm not gonna get into it now.
Yeah,
Haku?
Landon, the Pope made the only, true thing you do with this, which is just make hungering landmarkers in Jedza 2. I would never, ever hire this model in Jedza 1. I think 5 wounds, defense 5, willpower 5 is kind of a joke. For a 5-stone model, it dies as easily as the Moorwraith, if not easier.
Hard to wound means that they're not going to take a focus shot and die. So that's
Yeah,
like at least
you have
8
to
points in
be-
their favor.
You have to be cute with it, and any number of the current, upper echelon attackers that just don't give a crap about that. But yes, some people will find it more annoying to get around the hard to wound. That being said, super easy to kill this model. But it is funny to attack your own models and drop some Hungering Land markers, and then use Jedza to throw those around and just do some pretty obscene and annoying damage.
All right, Winston Finnigan. So I did not pick this guy to be in the thing. I have not hired Winston out of keyword in this list, so I'm kind of going speculatively. I think this is going to be something Doug can talk to more, but I see what you're doing with him. So Winston, first of all, this is a Jedza 2 hire. You never hire this in Jedza 1. Just put it out of the way. In Jedza 2, I think that the fact that one of the things Jedza 2 is always looking for is just ways to move around without taking walk actions, because all of her actions that aren't walk are so good. So he provides that. He also provides healing, which is just something the crew generally likes. He heals himself during opponent's activations. So we were talking earlier about how strong it is to trigger Chronicles during enemy activations, and he lets you do that. And he gives you an extra card, which is in Jedza 2 a really big deal, because this is a crew that has a lot of ability to cycle cards. We haven't talked about this yet. I was going to save it for the Vatagis, but one of the things with Jedza 2 is that the crew has an incredible ability to cycle cards between Off the Path and Austera and Twigge and various Chronicles, but she doesn't have a very good ability to add cards to her hand. So having a 7-card hand means a lot, because that's the card quality that you're going to be having is pretty good if you're cycling cards.
Yeah,
and just
that's a huge reason I was
raw card number is a big deal.
Yeah.
That said, I don't love Winston generally as an out of keyword hire, because I think Don't Mind Me is less good than it used to be. I think Celebrity is less good than it used to be. And so I find that my list would probably have difficulty taking him. I'm starting to think, what do I drop? I'm starting to drop models that I actually really want to bring, but I can see it. So some matchups maybe.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, I'm on board with you, Sam. I get it. I love Winston Finnigan. He's the man. He gives people spicy mustache rides, and it's great. Dirigible ride. There's two main reasons in my brain. One of them is exactly what you just said. Lots of cycling. You have an extra net card in your hand. You get 7 instead of 6, and it just helps you punch people with Jezda's Death Touch, and at least out of Jezda 2. And then I just love Dirigible ride. I really like that ability. So those are the two main reasons. I will concede that from GG2 to GG3, Don't Mind Me has gotten a lot worse in GG3. It used to be that Don't Mind Me was, really, really pretty decent in GG2 in some pools. And I will also concede that he's pretty expensive for what he's doing. And I've found that I'm not taking him as often as I was, at least in GG3 versus GG2. But the reason why I wanted to include him was have the conversation about the Arcane Reservoir, giving you another card in hand, and just additional movement flexibility with Jezda, repositioning her, making sure you're getting her or another key model exactly where it needs to be, either at the end of a turn so that you get to do some spicy fight for top of turn stuff the following turn. But that's basically why I had him in there. Again, I'm not going to die on this particular hill, but I think he's defensible in some scenarios. For those reasons, but that's what I got. Pope, what do you got?
I don't like Winston under the best of circumstances, so I'm gonna go with the I don't understand why he's here. You've done your best to try and explain it. I don't think I'm on board.
I mean, that's fair. He's expensive for what he's doing.
He's expensive. He's fragile. He doesn't really add too much to me, honestly. An extra card is an extra card, but I'm not paying 9 stones for that. I don't know.
I like Winston under the best of circumstances, but once the circumstances are no longer the best, my like for him dries up pretty quickly.
So what you boys are saying is, in the best of times and in the worst of times, it's oftentimes the worst of times for Winston.
Sure.
Especially in GG3. All right, Haku, what do you got? Is he also just trash tier in your mind?
Oh, hell yeah. I fucking hate this model. I mean, people have known I've hated this model since GG0. I've always been down on him. I hate that he doesn't have a single real attack. The only thing he ever does is Dirigible Ride, and Arcane Reservoir only goes so far when, there are other models in the faction that just draw a card. Just draw a card if you really, it's fine. It's pretty much identical to Arcane Reservoir. Yeah, he just dies. Good lord, he just dies. It's so much investment to keep this guy alive and in a relevant spot. And You could argue and Don't Mind Me was good. Maybe he did something, but I say no, not even then, because he would just die. What's the use of having a Don't Mind Me model when he's dead?
Okay. The Intrepid. This guy's a lot of stones. I mean, I get why you're taking him. He's gives you a lot of out of activation healing. He's activation, it's healing you don't have to spend AP on. So I understand why people would like him. Take the hit is also a big deal. The thing is though, like take the hit is a big deal for things like the Terra Kidnap, but Explorer Society has flush with cash. If you're concerned about getting like kidnapped or having other effects that have like one super powerful attack, just flush with cash it. 10 stones is a lot. Like I don't hate the Emissary. I also think the shield that he hands out is very good for a crew that is generally like surprisingly fragile, like much more fragile than people think. So I'm willing to put him in some matchups, but I'm generally just less enchanted with this guy and don't see myself hiring him that often.
Not even in a Jezda 1 bubble where you can kind of keep healing him back up and have a Def 7 guy just chilling? You don't like him?
I mean, I think I'm higher on him in Jedza 1. I'd put him in like mid-tier some matchups in Jedza 1 because you're also drawing a bunch of cards, so you can take the hit more often. So there's some like, neat synergy there. Pitching cards for take the hit feels real bad in Jedza 2. That crew is hungry for cards. And I just don't feel like he synergizes all that well with the crew. Like the healing's okay, but since the errata, it's much harder to get the healing off. Like it was a lot better when you could heal off of your own simple actions by beating your TN. Because as we've said, the crew has a lot of TNs.
Yeah, I agree with you in general. I was kind of playing devil's advocate there a little bit, but I think the biggest knock on him is he's just very expensive, right?
Yeah,
like
10 stones is a lot of stones.
He's very expensive, so it means that if you're taking this guy, it means you're maybe not taking an Ooze, or not taking Austera, or not taking the Kurgan, or not taking the Damned, and like all of those models I think are better.
Yeah, you're never not taking the Kurgan. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, you get what I'm saying, though, right? Like,
he's
10 points is a lot of points for this list. And I think that's the biggest knock that I've never, as an example, I've actually never even played with the Emissary in Seeker before, simply because I just have never had 10 points to fuck around and find out with. So it's kind of where I'm at. It's just a little too pricey for my blood. Pope, what do you got?
The Emissary I liked in Jedza 1 just because it helps you keep Jedza alive. I still kind of like it. It's a lot worse since the nerf. But the just truth of it is Jedza 1 will just die very quickly if you don't have a way to protect her. And so you're either relying on this guy or doing cute things with Mikhail. So I think it's at least sometimes. I don't think you would go to never.
Yeah, I would.
Some pretty neat utility out of Intimidating Roar on occasion. So
I wouldn't put him in never for Jedza 1. I'd put him in sometimes, but it's certainly a rare sometimes.
It's above the Damned in my opinion in Jedza 1. Take the hit is huge in Jedza 1. It dies so easily. Moving this model around isn't even that much. I'd put it above the Damned below Mikhail. Also because I kind of like new Mikhail, even though most people think he's worse.
I do agree with you, Haku. I do think it's much better in Jezda 1 than it is in 2.
Yeah, I every time I play Jezza 1, like, the biggest problem is Jezza just dies. I mean, obviously, losing, one of the big things he was also really nice for was constantly propping all your Chronicles turn 1. You don't get that anymore, but you still get the shielded, which is nice for the crew to have. And to be quite frank, like, unlike most of the other models we talked about, where we're like, oh, they have one cute little gimmick, and that's their whole card. His cute little gimmick is like just a fraction of his power. His attacks are just ridiculously good. Both the Stone Spear and his melee attacks are just very good attacks. Intimidating Roar is also very convenient for unpacking. Just how do you get the Kurgan up the board? Intrepid Emissary can help you with that, and then he gets other people up the board, and now you have your whole crew middle of the board with their whole bubble going like very easily. And then sometimes when you do it on enemies, you just get to throw a spear at them. So I actually really love this model. I think it's still quite cracked, even though you're no longer constantly proccing the heal. And now you actually get to see the benefits of using I Got Your Back, because that's another very good bonus action. So sometimes you just do that. And do you ever
grow into it? Do you ever take the the little fella and grow him to save a couple points. Have you ever done that, Haku?
I'm normally not a big fan of that. In specifically Jedza 1, I can see doing that.
Yeah, that
most of
was
the time
my
I would tell you no, but yeah, and Jedza 1's perfectly fine. You just have to remember the most annoying thing for me to remember is lead the way attack action when you're taking the little guy. So when he's helping you unpack, you do get owned by concealing. So be careful with that, especially because you set up some of your own concealing. So yeah, be careful with that. It's definitely doable though.
Yeah. All right. So Jin. Jin is here because he's just like a generically just brutally cracked model. I think Jin is a sometimes taken Jedza 1 just because that Jedza 1 as a crew doesn't tend to rely on having like a single really strong activation that you need to time perfectly. Like it's just a crew that sort of generically attrits and gains advantage over the course of the game. Jedza 2, I take him a lot. I don't know about auto include, maybe auto include, but being able to control activation in Jedza 2 is a big deal because her activation, when Jedza 2 activates, dictates the way your turn goes. And he's higher than Yaksha, come on. He's Jin Baccara, he's nuts. But sure, whatever. But in Jedza 2, you have an activation that the turn pivots around, and so having activation control is a big deal. In activation 1, you don't have, or Jedza 1, you don't have an activation, the turn pivots around, so it's less of a big deal, but he's still Jin. He's still really strong. So you'd only not take him if there's a powerful reason not to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think I would go as far as to say in Jezda 1, I'm not really taking him, because if I'm taking a Jezda 1 crew, I'm doing it because I want a defensive bubble that you just can't move, or I'm doing it because I want access to lost knowledge. I'm not doing it particularly because I want to be outwardly aggressive. Or I guess the way that you phrased it, Sam, was I'm not doing it because I feel that I need to set up a super killy activation, like how Jezda 2 activations often are, right? Where she maybe can remove 1 to 2 models in activation if she has a really good activation. But I will concede, he is a powerful model, and he does powerful things for, 8 soulstones in this list. So I think in Jezda 2, he's just on the tail end of auto-include for me, and I think in Jezda 1, he's probably on the lower end, if not the tail end of the back of the bus for some matchups. And that's kind of my thoughts on him. What do you got, Mr. Pope?
Yeah, I don't think Jin normally goes into the objectives of a Jedza crew. You don't usually alpha with this crew. Maybe it happens more in Jedza 2 than it does in Jedza 1.
That's what Jedza 2's crew does. It's an alpha crew.
Yeah. So I think it works there. I don't know that it works in 1 at all. So yeah, I think this is probably correct. I mean, the fact that you also can make concealing terrain for him helps a bit. I don't know that you're ever taking Lamplighters though. Because one of the things that's nice to do with him, especially when you're alphaing, is just not bury him, but sit him in concealing terrain and have him draw cards the whole game. Because as you said, cards are a problem. But yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about Jin on other episodes. I think there's not too terribly much to be said about him at this point.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add on is in Jedza 1, it's not necessarily, the reason I like him at sometimes is because it's not necessarily about alphaing, it's about defending from an alpha as well. You don't want them to have 2 activations in a row, therefore you're forced into hiring Jin. And I think against crews where you don't think that's going to happen, yeah, you don't need to hire him. He pretty much does just turn into 7 soulstones, draw a card at that point, which isn't necessarily terrible.
Yeah, but Jedza
really
1's
good.
A lost knowledge bot, so she really doesn't need the cards.
Yeah. So it's pretty much just a defensive, defending from their alpha, especially because, Jedza 1 is a frail little girl that you have to protect.
Mm-hmm.
All right, wait, I'm going to jump you on this one, Sam, to defend myself proactively, because I can sense the amount of hate about to come at me, this pick. I can feel it in my bones. So I put the Machinist in here on request. Internet, come at me. It's there specifically because of Eye of the Hurricane when it's really needed. I'm not saying it's an every time hire. I'm not even saying it's a sometimes food. It's like one of those like very specific foods that you really only eat on a special occasion, and you bring it in when you really need Eye of the Hurricane and you're expecting some form of devastating aura, like when Mr. Brandon jams candy into my face and just tries to schmegel me with it. That's kind of why I put it there. I know that it's often overshadowed, but I wanted to at least kind of drop that pebble into the pool to kind of have a conversation about it. That's why it's there from my perspective. What do you got? Come at me, Sam.
What you're describing isn't a food. It's basically like a laxative. It's something you take and you know you're going to have a bad time when you take it, but you take it because if you don't take it, you're going to have an even worse time. So we'll put this one in laxative tier.
Poop, worse than poop tier. It's laxative.
No, it's fine. Like, I understand what you're saying. I do not think that I would very often, if ever, be in a position where taking a machinist is the correct move.
It's my anti-Brandon model. It's my anti-Candy model. You know?
I just think that, especially with Jedza 1, like, if people want to put themselves in Jedza 1's bubble, like, you're not stuck in there with them. They're stuck in there with you, man.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, Haku, Landon. I mean, I think we know that it's kind of a cheeky take, but you guys got any opinions on this one?
The Vatagi, it's good.
No, we're talking about we're talking
No,
about
this
I'm
is the
still
machinist.
about the
Landon.
machinist. I'm sorry. I had just already written this model off as don't do this. Yeah,
Landon
don't do
doesn't
this.
even see the model on the tier list. It doesn't even
Yeah, no.
register in his brain.
I had already addressed this when I was looking at the tier list we were going over, and I'm like, oh, we'll just nope, that's directly into the trash. Yeah, 6 stones. This guy's really fragile. You take him, he dies. Like, you need flush with cash for these things to not die. And I'm not thrilled about paying 8 stones for the package it brings. Like, I don't know. I don't like machinist.
Yeah, that is a fair take. All right, Haku, are you piling it on anymore, my man?
Yeah, outside of EVS, I just literally don't see a reason. I would say if you do take them because you're super afraid of, I don't know, Seamus 2. I don't know. I think this counters Seamus 2, or does he counter? Whatever.
So when I talked to Carnage about this, the rule that I think came to was that they turn each other off.
Yeah, sure. That's going to be a TO thing, but there are other effects, and I think currently we'll see some of them that are happening in the new book that just came out that this is kind of nice against, but realistically, paying the extra tax on it for not being UBS is huge because, as pointed out, this model just dies. 5 wounds, literally no defensive tech. That being said, do remember Quartermaster can target herself, so at least you can cycle a card, which is cool, and you can also focus yourself with navigation charts. Woo.
Yeah, kill someone with Collier revolver shots.
Definitely just keep this in EVS. EVS, I don't want to shit on this model too hard. It's perfectly good in EVS, but yeah, no. Not outside. Not outside. Don't do this.
Don't do this. Just don't.
All right.
Landon, Sam's response was, it's worse than poop. It's a laxative. Landon's response was, I can't even see this model on the tier list. And then Haku was like, yeah, it's just bad, but reasonable. All right, let's actually talk about a really, really good out of
Okay,
keywords.
so let's not waste time. In Jedza 1, they're never higher. There's no reason to never hire one of these in the Jedza 1. In Jedza 2, they're an auto include. I usually take 2. So here's what's going on with this model. First, and less importantly, we've talked before about how Jedza 2 doesn't draw cards, she just cycles them. So she makes the cards in your hand good, but she doesn't add cards to your hand. This model draws cards. That's pretty sweet. It adds cards to your hand. Let's talk about why you're really taking them, though, which is that pit traps with Jedza 2 is some of the most degenerate gameplay I've ever done in Malifaux. Like, injured stacking is one of the most brutally, like, just ridiculous, broken gameplay loops that this edition offers. And Jedza 2, so Jedza 2 has, assuming she's got live tokens, she has a 4-5-6 irreducible attack. You know what's better? It's a stat 6 4-5-6 irreducible attack. And you know what's better than that is a stat 7-5-6-7 irreducible attack that inflicts injured. Like, the synergy between Jedza 2 and or Dredge Up and Pit Traps is unspeakably good. You make that's what you do with these guys. You make pit traps, you draw a card, first of all, which puts cards in your hand. You make pit traps, and then you use Dredge Up to push pit traps onto enemies and attack through them with Death Touch. And the last game I played with these guys, I was playing against Doug, and he was playing Dashel 2. And I got the initiative on turn 2, and I killed Dashel 2 from full health in a single activation before he had a chance to activate, because I just pushed pit traps on him and then slapped him with irreducible damage. And at that point, it's just a math problem. Like, I'm stat 7. What's your defense? How much health do you have? You're not going to be able to stone. Your shield doesn't matter. Your armor doesn't matter. All that matters is, do I have cards in my hand that can force through hits? And do I have cards? And do I have the ability to cheat damage? And then, like, you're just doing math at that point, and the math problem favors you because you get to dredge up 3 times. So you get to do 3. If you've been assiduous about putting pit traps out, you get to do 3 pit trap pushes, you get to do 3 pings, you get to do 3 stacks of injured, and then you get to make 3 attacks, all of which are almost certain to hit because your opponent's got an injured stacked on them and are going to do a bunch of irreducible damage. It's if you haven't played against it, it's hard to kind of really overstate what an insanely cracked play pattern it is. It's really fun to do. It feels good, and it's a way of just guaranteeing something dies. So I will always take a Vatagi with Jedza 2, and I'll probably take 2 because you can only dredge up a single pit once per turn, and
so you need
really
additional ones
you,
on the
you
map.
want to be having a bunch of them out on the map, and you also want to draw cards. Like, that's one of the reasons you're taking them, and you need 2 of them if you want to draw cards. And also, they have a ranged attack, and like, it's not even the worst ranged attack in the world, especially with Predatory Instinct, and the crew doesn't have a lot of ranged attacks, so this is a way of getting those.
You know what's a spicy include that we could talk about as it's a riff of the Huntsman take?
Mhm.
If you want to go even deeper into the Huntsman, you take the Butler, because then you can also throw additional traps at people.
Yeah,
It's really cute. I know. You just take a second Huntsman at that point, probably, instead of hiring the Butler. But if you wanted a third Huntsman, you could do that, I guess. Well, actually, you could just hire a third Huntsman, right? They're minion 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, these things in Jedza 2 just like make the crew. They make the crew go from like kind of fun to like doing something. Like, when you're playing Jedza 2 with Vatagi Huntsman, you're like, okay, so maybe I'm like actually doing something competitive now.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is that what you got on these boys, Sam?
Yeah, that's my guy.
Okay. Yeah, dude, I agree with you. So I played a couple games with them after we played that Dashel game. They're really good, and I think the point that you make about it just being a math problem, and Pope talks about this, and Haku talks about this a lot with not necessarily Jezda or Jezda, but other masters. If you're in a scenario where you just need to do some mid-level math to delete a model, and you don't really care about what your opponent is doing or can do, you're probably in a really good spot, and a very strong Jezda activation will allow you to do that if you've just done a little bit of setup on maybe turn 1. I think the key thing that I want to kind of double down on here is that you can only dredge up one marker. You can only dredge up a single target once per turn. So it's really critical that you have a density of these pit trap markers on the board so that Jezda can go dredge up, dredge up, dredge up, because that's how you're going to stack injured. That's how you're going to get additional ping damage, and that's how you're going to just schmanagle your opponent, oftentimes in a fashion in which they can't even do anything about it. And then the other big upside here is the Bond of Blood, and having 2 models with Bond of Blood, which allows you to draw 2 cards in a crew that is an Alpha Strike card-hungry crew. So again, I'm just kind of mirroring what Sam said, but he's the gremlin that taught me how to play this, so it makes sense that our opinions are fairly similar to one another. What do you got, Pope?
Yeah, injured stacking is really good. You guys have pretty much explained why these guys make the crew. Worth noting that you can also just shoot your own guys to make pit traps. You don't have to only use the bonus. So
Yep, that's the way you get 3 pit traps out by turn 2.
Yep. So it's pretty important to keep that in mind as just a back pocket trick, especially when you've got a couple of good models that just are reasonable targets for it. So yeah, drawing cards good, pit traps good, guns good. I don't know what else there is.
Well, the Butler is a bellhop porter, and it's not Apex, even though that's the only crew you ever hire in him. So you won't get the card if you hire him. So you probably don't hire him. But yeah.
Oh yeah, he's not Apex. He's versatile, isn't he?
Yeah, no, everyone. You would think he's Apex. That's literally the only crew you hire him. But no, he is versatile.
Yeah, that's
with
a good point. Well,
like,
I'm
no
an idiot. Yeah,
keywords.
ignore that. Sorry.
So
ignore
yeah,
me.
you're always just running 2 Huntsmen. The only other thing is maybe a Cryptoscore, but I don't think so in Jedza 2. Jazz the other Apex model. as addicted to those models as I am.
No,
It's-
you need the
but-
extra traps. You need to be able to pump out traps faster
Yeah,
than
I think, yeah. And you have enough good, like the Kurgan obviously is a pretty decent armor model. You may end up having shielded on at some point, or, you know, he just has ways to heal that you can just shoot him and drop some traps around him. And it's just kind of disgusting.
yeah.
And
like-
also remember your setup the kill triggers for when Jezda is pushing those into people.
yes, that's another thing is you should not forget that because people forget that all the time. But in addition to Jedza getting, you know, a bunch of like hazardous and a bunch of like other crap that she does, you also force your opponent to either pitch cards or just get shot some more.
Yeah. And it's two, and because you have two with set up the trap or set up the kill. I mean, you can
Well,
get.
remember, a model can only be affected by an aura ability with the same name once per
Oh, I
triggering,
didn't
and
realize that.
it is an aura, I believe. I'd have to double
Yeah,
check
yeah,
that.
Yeah,
You
but
are right.
since it's once per turn, I believe it's once per turn per model.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought
So
it was one per turn per model.
you're not getting 2 shots from one action, but if you put 2 pit traps marker, you can get 2 different setup the kill props.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Off of,
Yeah, on 2
off of-
separate. It just has to be on separate activations.
Right.
And then
Not
finally,
activation, separate actions.
yes.
Yeah.
And then finally, this is kind of like barely even worth noting, but just remember that they do have another attack that's not their gun, and if your target's a construct, they do irreducible. And stacking more irreducible in a crew that already has irreducible feels a little weird, but like that sometimes is what just pushes you over the edge into like one rounding a peacekeeper.
It's really good against Hoffman crews. Having two
Especially
of these
if they're
guys against
down to,
Hoffman
like,
crews.
literal 0 defense because Jedza's already moved a pit trap marker around on them. It's ugh,
Yeah, it's
good
gross.
models.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
good.
Vatagi are super underrated.
Yeah, they also make insanely excellent hidden martyrs.
Well, because they're
you
just
can-
worse Crypsis cores normally.
Yeah.
I think they have a different role. I mean, we can get into it when we do the Apex one. I think they have a different role.
Yeah.
All right. Any closing thoughts on the Vatagis here? Are we gonna go on to the Little House of Horrors, Little Shop of Horrors?
Sure. Why not put these
Okay.
useless models on the list?
No, we're not gonna succumb to Haku's like irrational hatred of botanists. Look, I don't think botanists are as good as a lot of people think they are, but this is a crew where they are good because you can generate a lot of destructible terrain markers. So ultimately, I would not take botanists very often in this crew simply because if I'm on a scheme pool where botanists are super good, I'm just gonna go with a crew that fuels them better than Jedza does. Like Nexus does it better and Ivan does it better, but if she can fuel botanists, you do generate destructible markers. It's a thing. I would put them in some matchups but pretty low, just because they're not terrible. There are times when you are going to want these guys. Like Haku hates them, but like in this GG, the GG that wants you to like sit in a place and not die, they're really good at sitting in a place and not dying. I just don't know what the reason I don't know why you'd hire them in this crew is that if you're in a pool where botanists are really good, you're not going to declare Jedza necessarily. You're going to declare a model that or a keyword that like synergizes better with botanists.
Have you taken them? Have you actually taken these out for a test drive in Jezda 2?
No, I've never had the occasion to.
That's fucking.
Haku's
fucking
trembling.
defend this model, and you're like, oh yeah, I just never use it
He's
though because it's bad.
trembling.
I don't use it because I explained why I wouldn't do it. I don't think the model is terrible. I just explained why I've taken botanists a bunch in this GG. I just haven't taken them with Jedza because if I'm in a good botanist pool, I'd take a master that's good with botanists.
Yeah, I get what Sam is saying. I share his general level of opinion, but I also have a bit of ennui about this model. I don't think I'm probably
existential boredom.
yeah. I just don't think they're they're not that interesting. I don't think for me. But I'm the same guy that put Machinist into this list, so hell do I know, to be fair. You got any spiciness on this, Mr. Pope, before Haku has his opinion?
Pops a vein in his forehead talking about how bad
Yeah.
botanists are.
Haku's about to throw his laptop into the wall.
I could say things about botanists, but I don't think you need to hear it twice. So I'm gonna let Haku take it over.
All right, Haku, go for it, buddy.
I've long time been a proponent of never hiring this model. Maybe never hire is a bit strong, but I really do actively dislike this model. It has no way of getting out of engagement. It has no real way of like special interaction. So a lot of the reasons you're hiring this model don't really work. So you have to ask yourself, what is this model now doing? And most people would be like, oh, it's a model that can just sit there, stand there, and just be a dork for 6 soul stones and have defense 7, willpower 6. And it's like, okay, but like, what is it doing while it's doing that? At least in GG2, they were kind of good at going on the outskirts and picking up I keep forgetting the name of the strat, but the strat I'm talking about where they just hide markers and they're they were kind of decent at being 6-stone models that have 3 AP that can go do that. Why were you hiring over Beam and Calypso back then? Who the fuck knows? But some people, thought about it. The biggest problem
because
will always
didn't own
be
the Beam Calypso model, maybe.
Yeah, I
That's
guess
the only reason, maybe.
But the not being able to get out of engagement really hurts. Not being able to really have like a solid attack, I think, is actually a pretty significant problem. Because modern day, you can just kind of ignore these models. I mean, arguably, ignoring it's not necessarily the best option when it's the point control strat, but it's also not like the worst. And even though they can get to defense 7, willpower 6, they're still not hard to kill. As we talked about, how much like ping damage is really good in this GG. Barry is perfectly good at way to answer this model. Targeting move stat is perfectly fine. Like, there's a lot of ways to just kind of get around the stat 7 defense to just make this model be a 7 wound model with no defensive tech. And not being able to be moved is cool. It's not that relevant, even though we've talked about how good movement effects are in this GG. I still don't think it's that relevant because you just kill the model instead of moving it. There are just easier ways to answering it, especially now when there are so many good ways to injure models. There are good ways to just hit a stat 6 willpower or hit even a stat 7 defense. There are definitely enough models that can do that. How many cards are you going to be able to invest in this? You're already investing a good chunk of your setup into just making sure that they have 2 grow tokens, that you're undoing a lot of the work your crew would like to have otherwise. You talk about how easy it is to generate markers, but you want those markers there. You don't want them gone. You want the pit trap markers littered around the board. You want geo markers littered around the board. So realistically, your way of removing them is relying on their shockwave sometimes because no one else is really removing them. And then you're also just getting rid of the resources you actively want. So particularly in Jedza, I actually just don't see this model seeing play. I don't like it. I don't like the lack of attacks, the lack of anything. The shockwave is kind of cool, but it's move 12, so it's largely ignorable, and you have to lose your grow tokens. So now you're also just super killable. So pretty much all you have is a model that sits in the middle of the map in GG3 and can punch somebody at a stat 6 if you invested a bunch of resources for 1, 2, 3 and staggered, which fine, you have some decent triggers, but that's just not good enough.
I'm not going to defend Botanist in this crew. Like, I'll defend them in a crew that can just like really trivially feed them a bunch of grow tokens. I think they push carts. Like, that's a big thing they do in this GG that I think is worth it. Like, they're really good at pushing carts, but I don't care enough about Botanist to go to the mat for them.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so what we're going to do next, guys, is we're going to have Mr. Haku break down Jezda 1, talk a little bit about the core strategies behind Jezda 1, talk a little bit about reasons why Haku might look to be taking that crew, and any tips and tricks he has for playstyle. Then Dr. Barrow's Fishman is going to go over some high-level Jezda 2 play, and then we're going to wrap it up with Mr. Pope's thoughts on how to beat the crap out of a Jezda crew. Thanks so much, guys, for all the feedback on all these videos. It seems people are really liking them, and we're really doing our best to try to kind of iterate and improve the process here. So if folks have feedback for us about anything here, they think our takes are bad, if they love Sam, if they hate me, if they whatever, let us know in the comments, guys. We read every one of them. We try to reply to every one of them. All right, Haku, so why don't you give us a little bit of an overview on Jezda or Jezda 1, particularly playstyle in general, pools that you look to take her into, schemes that you like scoring with her, and I'd also be curious, specifically for Jezda 1, about particular crews or models that really ruffle your jimmies in terms of disrupting the heal bubble. And I think even before we do any of that, just for the folks at home that aren't really familiar with Jezda 1, can you explain how the heal bubble works in general? Just before you, like, kind of just as a preface, if you can.
Okay, yeah. I'll talk about Jedza 1. And by the way you mean the heal bubble works, you mean the damaging heal bubble or the not die heal bubble?
The never die, nothing ever dies, oh my god, why isn't anything ever dying bubble.
Okay. So, Jedza, at the start of the game, she starts with a couple of life tokens. This is the fragility of life bonus. And whenever a friendly Seeker model dies within 6, reduces 0 health, you can discard a life token to heal it 2 instead. After any model is killed within 6 of her, you gain a life token. So, pretty much, as long as you have life tokens, things around you aren't dying, especially because once they heal from dying, the next attack, that activation from her Chronicle Wanderer, is going to prevent the next damage it would take down to 0, that activation. So you really have one attack to try to kill the model, and if you do, then it heals back up. Your second attack can't kill it. You have to have a third attack in order to basically put down anything inside Jedza's bubble. Either that or just be able to chain activate, yada yada yada. That's pretty much some of it. She likes being in a circle, and she, prevents anything from realistically dying around her. For that reason, the schemes and strategies you're mostly going to run her in are any of the ones that involve you being in the center of the map, not doing anything. So wagons is actually not a terrible choice because you just get to push them down the middle, and you can keep them both together inside your bubble. You can also do the same for most of the strats currently are actually pretty decent for her. Her only real big issue, I would say, would be, cursed objects, where there are potential scheme and strats pools that literally never involve leaving your deployment. And in that instance, you would have to move your whole crew to their deployment. They'll just have too much time being able to ping you off. So I would definitely say watch out for that. Otherwise, if the schemes work out pretty well that they have to be in the middle or on your side of the map, then it's probably still fine to take Jedza 1, but it's looking a little bit more questionable. So just pretty much stick to whatever involves being in the center of the map as a crew, as a unit. For that reason, you pretty much only hate crews that are good at making you not be in a bubble. Big ones obviously are going to be Berry crew, so Tara, Lady J are just great options to just completely wreck your shit. You can take the Intrepid Emissary to try to stop it a little bit, but both of those have ways of getting around take the hit, and they can just attack twice. So you have to be very careful with that. 33 is still just disgusting unless it's been changed by the time this comes out, which we have strong.
By the time it comes out.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that. Yeah, you probably don't have to worry about Tara as much anymore. Obviously, getting buried and then having your models killed is still very relevant, but 33 is no longer going to work the way it works, as we have seen from people who have gotten boxes with 33. So hip hip hooray for that. That being said, you still have to watch out for anyone who obeys aren't really a problem, because you can kind of play around them a bit using Mikhail and Jedza as a master can't be obeyed. So that works out pretty decently, but anyone else who has decent movement effects, you do have to watch out for. It's just not that common, I feel like, and a lot of them target willpower, and you're stat 8 willpower, so you're generally content playing what you want. So the next big thing you're looking for is just out of activation movement. So treasure map is obviously always a really good strong choice, just to get end phase movement, as well as that pretty much end phase movement. I think that's pretty much everything I would want to say about Jedza 1. You're playing a much more center-oriented game for reasons. Because of that, I'm not the biggest fan of the Damned in that list anymore. You can definitely take a few more models as well, like the Crypsis Core on the back line, just because once you have your front line set up, a lot of things can get to your back, so you can just pop things through. Jedza 1, great in a bubble. Kurgan makes it so much stronger, especially if you play with someone who allows you to abuse Grave Goose. I definitely don't think that the Moorwraith Kurgan can very easily get someone situated in multiple auras, as well as maybe being inside of a forest. So every time you move a model or it takes an action, it's just bam, 3 damage of hazardous and 3 poison. We can get utterly ridiculous. For that reason, in Jedza 1, you normally are keeping the Grave Goo inside the bubble and very rarely going out with it. So that's a thing to watch out for as well.
Any models that you hate seeing across the table as counterattack against you, and Jezda 1 specifically?
Models I hate seeing across the table. Whew, I'm not actually sure. Obviously, I think anything that incidentally does like shockwaves or blasts is going to be super annoying. So a big one, obviously, everyone's talking about him. Damien's going to be super annoying to see across the table for those exact reasons. Anything that are like incidentally killing things is just going to be like very strong. Yeah, blasts and shockwaves are what I worry about, because you want to be crumped, you're going to be taking a lot of potential shockwaves. If they target move, you're stat 4, and there are a lot of TN 13 move duels. I did say this during the thing. I will reiterate this because I've watched a few people play GG3 Jedza 1 now, and Life of the Earth, I think's value just went up a lot, especially with the Kurgan. It's very rare to ever see impassable severe terrain, and if you do see impassable, if you see your opponents pick Jedza and wants to declare like some weird boxes as severe terrain that they climb up, therefore making them impassable as well, watch out for that. Maybe try not to let them do that, because when this pulse is giving out both staggered and damage, it becomes so much harder to justify not passing it, because every subsequent duel is going to be 2 points harder, and that can get really bad, really annoying. So watch out for what the terrain looks like on the map. It can literally just makes Jedza, if they have nice big terrain pieces, to Life of Earth. And now that Kurgan exists, that's always.
So Jedza 2, I really like playing Jedza 2. I mentioned this earlier, but a lot of playing Jedza 2 is just doing math, because like one of the things in Malifaux that sucks is when you have a cool plan and your opponent like decides to be uncooperative and have good cards, or have like soul stones, and then like their model lives and you feel sad. You don't have to worry about that with Jedza. You just like do math and then models die. So her big asset is obviously that she has an irreducible attack that can do a ton of damage. She can also do it from a complete position of safety. So what you really want to be doing with her is setting up markers for her to dredge up through, because she is not super tanky. I think she's tankier than her original. Because Life Leech is a very, very strong ability, and it's very strong in this crew because of the way it triggers Chronicles, but it's not the strongest in the world. And she's, bad defense, just hard to wound. So what you generally want to do is have her not taking any walk actions. You want to load her up with focus using Sophie, and maybe she takes a concentrate action turn 1. And then you just sort of have a bunch of pit trap markers, and then you push them into your opponent's models, and then you make a bunch of stat 7 attacks, then you make some stat 8 attacks, and you make some stat 9 attacks, and then models die because you just hit them with a bunch of extremely high stat irreducible damage attacks. So generally, you're always going to take the Kurgan. I think you're almost always going to take the Goo because it's so good with the Kurgan. You're almost always going to take Austera and Twigge, and you're always going to take 2 Vatagis. And that is a lot of your list. My lists with Jedza 2 look very, very samey. I think that sometimes you drop the Goo, sometimes you drop Twigge and Austera, sometimes you drop Jin, although I think you like Jin with her a lot because she has this powerful Alpha Strike style gameplay, and you want that activation control. But you don't necessarily always take it. That's something you got to kind of think about. But what you're generally looking to do with her is you're looking to, with the possible exception of turn 1 on distant deployments, you're just looking to find something valuable that you can remove every single turn. And sometimes that's the opponent's master. Like if your opponent has a master like Hoffman, and you can somehow isolate him from his protected targets, which is harder to do, or maybe let's say more realistically, instead of Hoffman, you're talking about like, I don't know. I'm just like thinking off the top of my head, like Dashel 1, right? Like Adashel one's got armor, he's got laugh off. If he doesn't have guild guards near him to take the hit, you just kill him. Like, just murder him. Or if your opponent's playing, like, I don't know, Nekema, like, God forbid, just kill her. Like, you have the ability, uniquely among masters, to just, like, pick an enemy target, and it doesn't really matter what they're doing. All that matters is how many wounds they have and what numbers are printed on their card. And those numbers had better be really, really high because of the way you can stack injured. So if you're not removing stuff with her, then you're not really doing what the crew wants to be doing. So you need to be very aggressive about sort of picking targets and setting up to kill them. And everything else in your crew exists to help you do that. And then sort of in the later turns, it's going to become more difficult to do that reliably every single turn. So you're going to start using her other abilities, and you're going to realize they're really good. Off the Path is a really strong ability. Her Shockwave's okay. I find when I'm not, that, like, because it like the fact that it inflicts injured is a big deal because it starts the chain of, you know, injuring people. But because it's a bonus action, you only get one of it, so your opponent is going to cheat on the models that really matter, but it taxes their hand. And the number one weakness she has is that her crew doesn't draw cards, and Seeker just generally has a bunch of TNs. She has some TNs. She also really wants to save cards and use them herself. So the rest of her crew is in the unenviable position of both needing cards and not having a hand. So you want stuff that doesn't necessarily require cards. Again, one reason the goo is good is that it's hazardous or doesn't require it to flip. And you want models that are basically going the farthest with the cards you've got. So Austera is good, just cycling bad cards into good ones. And Vatagis are good because they draw. But that's pretty much the gameplay. Like, I don't want to break it down too much farther beyond that. The goal is just to, like, find something you can delete and delete it. And when you can do that, it feels really good, and it feels really bad for your opponent because they're totally helpless. Your opponent will sometimes have a good hand, and you will have a reasonable hand, and then you will push a pit trap marker over your opponent, and you will slap them with a stat 7, and then they will take the irreducible, and then you will push another pit trap over your opponent, and you will slap them with a stat 8, and they will look at their hand of, like, 11s and 12s and be like, crap, none of these cards are going to make me survive. Like, I'm going to die, and I have a hand of 11s and 12s. I can't do anything about it. That sucks for your opponent, but it feels really good for you.
Are there any, I guess, as a closeout here, Sam, the two questions I have for you. When you're hiring a Jezda 2 crew, or when you're looking to play Jezda 2, what primary strategies are really good for her in general? And what secondary schemes are ones that you often find yourself taking for her?
The ones the only strategy I really don't like taking her in is Carve a Path, because I don't like spending a bunch of AP on that. I think that the other strategies are all fine, because anything that forces your opponent to be in a specific place, your ability to sort of set up markers, you have the ability to make certain areas of the board just be like super terrible bad neighborhoods that your opponent has to roll up their window when they go through. And like, so, you know, the various like guard and covert, you can do that, and I think it makes your opponent very gun shy about getting near markers. Maybe less covert just because they can spread out more and your crew isn't fast enough to really spread out that effectively. And then for schemes, I think that you want schemes, you want Vendetta, because Austera is like one of the best Vendetta targets in the game. And I think that generally you can do okay with these marker type schemes because Dredge Up has this trigger to drop a scheme marker. So you can advance your game plan for, you know, spread them out or for sabotage or something while you're also killing your opponent. Like, you're not investing AP necessarily in advancing your game plan. You're investing AP in doing the thing she likes to do, which is kill people, but you're also just incidentally advancing the scheme. I don't like any scheme with her that requires you to do stuff with minions, like catch and release, because Seeker minions are bad.
That's fair. All right. Any closing thoughts on Jezda 2 here before you sign off, Mr. Dr. Barris Fishman?
She's awesome player. She's a lot of fun.
And Huntsman forever.
Be careful with your cards. You don't have a ton of cards. They all matter. You have a ton of TNs. Like, you need to, when you are playing Jezda 2, you need to develop the skill, which is generally a good Malifaux skill, of learning when to, like, accept that you failed a TN and not worry about it.
Fair enough. Thank you for your service, sir.
All right.
All right. Haku, why don't you give us closing thoughts on how to dismantle the Seeker keyword?
Yeah, as I was saying a little bit earlier, Jedza 1, it's all about killing Jedza. If they're not taking the Intrepid, you can just go in there, kill her. The rest of her crew folds like wet paper towels. All the crew is very frail, pretty much, and just dies. If they do take Intrepid, just know you're going to get around take the hit some way or another. Sometimes that's moving the Intrepid, sometimes that's trying to move Jedza, although that's much harder. You just want to try to murder Jedza most of the time right away, or wait for them to send their own models out to try to do schemes and strats, and then just kill them then. Jedza 2 is much more interesting to talk about. A lot of what we're talking about is the alpha of Jedza 2, or the pit trap markers. Obviously, the easy thing is just be able to ignore severe terrain is huge. They can't do any of the pit trapper shenanigans or the geo shenanigans. So, Guild, this is your time to finally hire that one upgrade whose name I always forget. That gives you...
No prisoners?
Yeah, no prisoners. In order to ignore some hazard terrain. Great. The rest of what you really want to do against Jedza 2 is not even necessarily remove Jedza off the map, as good as that can be. It's just that her power spikes at the beginning and kind of starts falling off a little bit later if you can remove the rest of the supporting pieces. Once you start spending the life tokens, she'll find it harder and harder to get life tokens back. Now she's just a 2/3/4 reducible, which, don't get me wrong, still very good, but it's normally not necessarily breaking the bank. It's very similar to most people just being hit by a SAT 3. So what you end up going to want to do is you pick off a lot more of the support models. You find ways to make sure the pit trap markers can't get, aren't getting near your irrelevant models. The fact that Jin exists is just an unfortunate reality we have to face with. So if you are a faction that can't generate pass tokens, I feel bad for you. You're just going to get stuck with them having last activation. The best I can say is try not to lose initiative so they don't get 2 actions in a row, and it's just like they won initiative at that point. But otherwise, you're just going to have to play for them to just double dick you, and that's always going to just be very annoying against alphas. One of the last big things I think you should try to do is just kind of spread out. The crew's still relatively slow. If you're able to just force them to engage with you on 1/4 of the map, then you pretty much have free reign of the rest of the map, because they really do work together very synergistically. And once they're apart from each other, just like Jedza 1, their value just kind of plummets, and they now have to make sure that they're actually winning these duels and are forcing you to lose. And it's not like it's easy for them to get that pit trap under you round 1. So you really have a decent amount of say of where the combat's going to be and where you can force them to try to alpha you, if you know that that's what they're setting up to do, to then play around them and just kind of either flank them or just try to suffer the losses by pit trapping them with models that you can afford to lose.
Yeah, that's fair. That's actually really good feedback. I guess, Pope, any closing thoughts on this one, on Seeker in general?
Jedza 1 gets a bad rap. It's really nice for new players to just play a crew where they don't have to worry about all their guys dying immediately. I think it's pretty beginner friendly for that reason. So if you're thinking about playing a crew and you're not really sure what it is in Explorers, Jedza's not a bad starting point.
Yeah, that might be a good. That's a pretty good point in general, because I'll say as a person that picked up ES as my second faction, they don't have a ton of keywords that are super easy to play. So having a good entry point into the faction, I think, is a good point that you call out there. So I think that's worth noting. Well, thanks guys, as always. This was a lot of fun. We're gonna keep doing it. You're gonna keep seeing more tier lists from us. And we're going to keep improving the formula. Like I said, let us know what you guys have for feedback in the comments, any suggestions, whatever you want to do, put it down there. We read everything, and we really appreciate the community feedback that we've been getting on these tier lists, and we like making them. So we're going to keep doing it. All right, guys, have a good one, and we'll see you next time on the planet.